Hi there, YouTube. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. Let's grab our friends over on Twitch, and we will be on our way. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, doing much better today on Friday than I was yesterday on Thursday. We had to cancel the show at the last minute, and I'll give you the straight-up reason why. I actually came in, took a nap on the couch, and right around, so I put a message up saying, yeah, we got the show tonight on Thursday. We'll see you at 6. Took a nap on the couch here. Alarm went off, and I just couldn't move. I managed to get sat up in the chair. I mean, on the couch. It's like I had a tranq dart in my neck. I was just plain crashed, and I sat there for 5, 6, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. I could not get going. It was really a little alarming, to be honest with you. So rather than do a lame show, because we've never done a lame show ever here at the Stratosphere Lounge. They've all been masterpieces, every one of them. But rather than do that, I just decided to postpone it. I slept an awful lot today. Went down for a cardiac stress test, and they stress you. But that came back, pretty good. Looks like I might have a slightly, might have a little blood pressure problem, but that might have something to do with the 15 pounds of weight I put on, which I need to take back off again. But in any event, I am feeling so much better now after having gotten a lot of rest. And yeah, it was creepy, scary yesterday. I was Count Orlok. We were talking about Nosferatu, which I like very much, which we talked about that on Monday. And I saw Bill Sarsgaard talking about that. I couldn't believe he did the face, but for those of you who've either seen or not seen, not certainly no spoilers here because I think it's a great movie. You should go see it. Although for our audience, which tends to be a little more conservative, there's a very strong sexual theme throughout all of Eggers' movies. But the thing about the vampire Nosferatu is the voice, and the voice scares the living bejesus out of you long before you ever see his face. His face isn't crazy scary. It's appropriate for the voice, but the voice, Sarsgaard. I thought absolutely for sure that Sarsgaard had. I didn't know Sarsgaard was the Count, and I didn't know he did the voice until I saw the credits. But I thought the voice was really done through AI. I just thought it was one of these things where they would mix, like tiger growls and just sort of AI the voice, and all natural. And Sarsgaard was talking about this, and he would say when he was doing the voice for Orlok, he had to get it low. And many of the scenes in the movie take place with a guy who's a British actor who's got a very, very great low voice, And Sarsgaard would talk about before he'd get on the set, he'd do a 40-minute set. He would massage his larynx, And I'm going to go through this now because my voice is much higher than it should be. So we basically get this loosened up. Then my problem is I've got this tinnitus, and when I speak in what should be my natural register, which is still lower than this, somewhere around here maybe, something like that, or lower even, I can't hear myself in a conversation. So I have pretty much all my life pitched my voice up here, which is where you can only hear me, and when I get really excited, only dogs can hear me. But he was talking about getting that voice lower, and then in his chest, then in his diaphragm. He said he wanted his voice to come from his pelvis, and it's you're late, and all of the hard consonants and rolling the R's. The first time you hear Orlok's voice in the new Nosferatu, it just sends a shiver up your spine. It's like, oh, this is not this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. He did something interesting too. A little thing, but I mean, the classic vampire tale. So the original Nosferatu. I know this is more of a Monday topic, but here we are on Thursday. Got some Thursday things to talk about. I think Eric said that there's 13 questions, so we'll get through all of those tonight, however long it takes. But the original Nosferatu, FR, FW Murnau, German filmmaker, the original version was an unauthorized ripoff, basically, of Dracula, obviously. But it wasn't Dracula. So it wasn't Count Dracula, it was Count Orloff. It was basically a sound-alike. And and so all of the familiar characters, the same exact story. In fact, when I was watching Nosferatu, I was just sitting back, just enjoying it, you know? And it just visually it's just so beautiful, and the accents and the period piece, just the historical aspect. I love the history of it, and I was just soaking it in, just loving it. And I realized I know this story so well, but he changed the names of the characters. Like, it's the exact same story. There's this young woman who the count becomes obsessed with. The young woman has a husband, and the husband goes to Castle Dracula and negotiates a deal because Orlok is moving to London, and or Dracula, and then he manages to escape the clutches of the vampire, comes back home, and then together with the wise man, the archetypical wise man. This would be the equivalent of Gandalf or Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is why it's such a great story. It's got a lot of classical arc in it, and in that case, that'd be Van Helsing, Professor Van Helsing, and together they battled the vampire, and they win in the end. Now, what he did was he kept that exact same story, but he changed the names. So the young fiance was always Jonathan Harker, if I remember correctly. That was the name I've seen him in. I'm pretty sure that's the name that Keanu Reeves used in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Van Helsing, and Dracula. But it's not Dracula. It's Orlok, and it's not Jonathan Harker. It's Thomas something, and it's not Van Helsing. It's Professor LaFrance or something. He changed the names to give it a fresh feel, because I think if he'd used Van Helsing, we'd be a little bit too much like we're watching a rerun. But in any event, the movie's just absolutely terrific, and I really really liked it. Why am I'm running two streams on YouTube? That's not good. Um, I don't know how to stop that other than restarting the stream on YouTube. I shouldn't have to. I had one that started and it said that the chat was turned off, so I just stopped it and restarted it. I don't know what to do about that. I hope I don't. In any event, for the time being, I'm going to let things just kind of sit. So, because I think if I had to, I'd just mess up everything, and we're just going to eat it. So there we go. Anyway, the voice is, I can't reproduce it, but God, it is absolutely fantastic. So that's that. Um, two streams on YouTube. We run two streams. We run a stream from OBS Desktop, which goes straight to Twitch, and then we run one from what is this thing called? This is a relation of OBS Desktop, Streamlabs Desktop, which goes to YouTube. And there you go. Sadwing says Boomer's going to boom. Well, I don't know what to do with this newfangled technology. It's crazy. I have one running and one up and coming. Just quickly, I'm not going to waste a lot of time with this. Let me just see if I can cancel one. You know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just not. It's just going to wreck the night, and I just don't care. I'm sorry. So, um, uh, 116 is live, but the 117 is in a holding pattern. God, it's a 117 that should be running. Um, it's always something. We got 111 people watching the stream. I'm not gonna restart it. I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm just I just I don't know what happened, but I'm just gonna let it go. I know I had one job, just one job. Uh, Says Road Rider. One job, that is to get the stream up and running, monitor the stream, produce the content, and respond to the credits, the comments, and also to do the questions and keep the ball rolling. So anyway, we're going to let that go. Since we spoke last on Monday, we had two big rocket launches. One of them had a first stage that went up and then crashed, and the second stage went into orbit, and the second one had a first stage that went up and landed, and the second stage crashed before it got to orbit. The second launch attempt on Blue Origin, New Glenn, was much better handled than the first launch attempt. They kept adding 10 minutes to everything. I think the New Glenn rocket is a gorgeous rocket and has some qualities that that are superior to Starship. It's not fully reusable. So the upper stage is hydrogen powered, I think, on the New Glenn. That's considerably more efficient than what Starship is, but it's a great looking rocket with those fins in the middle, and then the kind of metal, cool looking metal stuff, and the strakes and stuff. It's a great looking rocket. I just don't like New Origin's entire corporate strategy. They've had that thing under development for 15 years, and they don't reveal anything. I think SpaceX is much better. Not just in terms of public relations, just think it's a better strategy. I mean, I don't know what happened to the booster on Blue Origin. I'm sure somebody's got it figured out. But I have this philosophy about these kind of things, and that is you're going to have to crash a certain number of rockets before you succeed. And the sooner you crash them, the sooner you can get them flight ready, put humans on them, and then they have much smaller chance of crashing. I get the feeling Blue Origin's going to have to fly a bunch of flights, and they don't have the operational tempo. I don't know when the next one is due, but I know that Starship has, a bunch of boosters ready and a bunch of ships ready. This was their first Block 2 ship. And I'm sure by now, if you're into the whole SpaceX thing, you saw the footage of you probably saw the footage of the pieces of Spaceship One reentering, because of Starship reentering, because it's spectacular footage. It's absolutely spectacular. There's also a clip, not quite as common. There's also a clip of a little point, which is the Starship, and then just explodes in space, because the thing was, they had one engine shut down. It's about 8.5 minute ride to orbit. They had one engine shut down about 7.5 minutes in. So this thing was mostly there. And then they lost another engine, and it looks like what happened was they had asymmetrical thrust, where there were center engine and two on one side, all firing. None of the other two. That's gonna just basically pitch the rocket up and put unsustainable stresses on it. And so it was such a catastrophic failure. It's kind of like, wow, it's didn't even feel like SpaceX. But you know what? You don't know what you don't know. So something, I think they said an oxygen leak or something on the first of these Starship Mark IIs. So the only answer to this is fly it again, get it fixed, which means he'll get it fixed in a week. They've probably got it fixed by now. But in any event, find out what happened on this one, fix that. They sure seems to have the booster down. They did the catch on Flight 5. They didn't catch it on Flight 6, but I think that was because of telemetry coming from the chopsticks, not a problem with the booster. They caught it on Flight 7, and it's just looking automatic. It's like watching a 747 land now. I don't want to say it's not thrilling anymore, but it's like, yeah, that's what catching a 30-story building looks like. So they're going to refly the booster on Flight 9. Great. tower had damage on Flight 6, so presumably they fixed that, and then they caught the booster again. So as a number of people were saying, you get it once the first time. They got it the first time. I'm just glad they caught it the first time they tried. I thought that was cool. Yeah, and the booster swinging in the wind, that was pretty cool, because the thing is only hanging on these two little, tiny little pins. It is essentially, free floating there. One of the things that I'd like to see them do, just as this is entirely for, I don't want to say publicity purposes, but maybe just for morale purposes. They're certainly not going to try and catch the ship next time, because they got to get that ship. They can't risk the ship breaking up over Mexico, or there's always a risk of that happening. But they got to get that ship. So we're not going to see a ship catch next time, which people are telling me is going to be in February, which is great. But when they do catch the ship, what I'd really like to see is I'd really like to see them launch a booster, catch the booster, launch a ship, catch the ship, and then stack them, and say if we were operational, we'd have this thing refueled in another hour, and they could both go again. That would be really, really cool. So they're not far off, but something with the Mark II was clearly not working. Yeah, there's Tower 2. Road Rider says you just catch the booster on Tower 2, and I just want to see him. I just want to see him restack them as if it was ready to go again, because he was talking about from the beginning, and I just thought this was madness. A couple years ago now, madness. He was saying we'd like our turnaround time on these things to be about an hour, and I said an hour. You mean a week, right? If you're really on the ball, if you've really got your act together, you might be able to turn it around in a week. Now he's going to do it in an hour. Okay, so anyway, I was real happy to see New Glenn get off the pad, and they did achieve their primary objective, which was getting their second stage into orbit. So I just think that they need to up their operational tempo, and I really don't understand why New Glenn did their, unless this might be their corporate policy. See, Bezos has just got so much ego, but I'm wondering, why do you launch this thing at nighttime? And the only thing I can think of is because you'd want to watch your rocket go up. All you can see is the nozzles. It's not sweet tea. It's definitely not sweet tea. What you think you'd want to see it? I would like to have seen it, but I think he did it because I don't think he wanted explosion footage if the thing blew up. I can't figure out why else you would do that at nighttime. So there you go. Anyway, it's actually Sprite Zero. So people have said that the artificial sweeteners sometimes can be worse than the real sweeteners. So the sugar sweeteners. So we'll see. Mobile Moto says SpaceX will be lucky to fly in March with the FAA incident investigation. Yes, Mobile Moto, you'd be right if this was a year ago. However, we have a new administration coming in, which brings me to the next little piece of discussion. This will be the last time that we all talk together under the Joe Biden administration. Isn't that nice to know? When we get together again on Monday, it'll be the Trump administration, and by the end of the day on Monday, I suspect there will be so many executive orders that the country will be very different by Monday night. So this is the last time we have to deal with that horrible man, and my right angle this week, because it wasn't just yesterday that I was drugged out, tired. I've just been zero energy all week. This is the most energetic I've been in days, maybe weeks even, because I got enough sleep. Maybe that was it. But in any event, oh man, Dave Big Booty says I voted Trump Vance, not Tramp Dunce. I've never heard that before. That's awesome. Tramp Dunce. So there'll be that. One of the things we did, the right angle posted already on Karen Bass' reaction to the fire and so on. which Scott Ott in the backstage show said she was Ghana with the winds, and I just love that so much. So, but I haven't done anything about the fires, and I need to. One of the reasons I haven't is because, well, first of all, we were dealing with the fires. I had to evacuate Natasha. I didn't feel the need to evacuate at all, but she was getting really to the point where she couldn't sleep. She's just had this app open and she's just watching these little red dots get closer and closer to us. They ended up being about 8 miles away from us across the valley floor. There's no way that fire's coming to our house. But I could not convince her of that, no matter how hard I tried. So we had to evacuate her to Orange County for a night and a half. Um, the But I haven't said anything about the fires really. Yeah, Scott Ott bought Frozen Scott. Yeah, that wasn't fun to find out his file was corrupted, but nevertheless, there it is. Uh, the the I haven't said anything about the fires, and I kept thinking, man, people are beating me to the news about it. There's the whole Karen Bass in the airport. There's all of this. What can I add to this? There's so many reports about this. There's nothing I can think of I can add. And then I finally realized, no, the thing I'm going to do is I'll probably record it tomorrow if I can. Um, I'm going to call it Los Angeles, and I'm just going to talk about uh, what it feels like to to have so much of um, just so much of our memories just gone. When people say, whenever I have guests come to Los Angeles, whenever anybody comes to the city for the first time, Scott and his lovely wife came to visit, and the first thing we did was we just drove out Pacific Coast Highway to out past Malibu, out to Point Doom, something like that. Um, and uh, and I just want to talk about the appeal of the city because everybody's constantly asking me all the time, telling me, really, get the hell out of there. Why are you there? And I've never fully explained what it is about this place that is so appealing to me. And I figured that's probably the best thing I can do about the LA fires is to give people a sense of why anybody lives here, let alone conservatives. I'll tell you this though, there is a definite change here in the air in terms of politics. Um, Lapko says you're old. You should be used to lost memories by now. I have wonderful lost memories. I just don't remember what they are. Um, but I'm going to talk about the first time I got here because I got off the plane in 1988, and and my friend Fritz had already moved out here, and he picked me up at the airport, and we just drove straight out Pacific Coast Highway out to Malibu, past Malibu, almost to the Ventura County line. There's a little place there called the Staircase. It's called that because it's a out of the way parking lot. It's a little gap in a hedge. If you don't know exactly where to turn, you'd never ever find it. It's house, driveways, all these houses, little gap in the hedge, then more houses. But if you knew where that gap in the hedge is, you can turn in there. There's a little open parking area, and there's somebody cut a staircase down from the cliffs, which are a couple 100 feet, I would say, um, down to uh, down to the ocean. So we just got out there. I brought my wetsuit, bought a wetsuit to bring with me because you don't need a wetsuit in Florida. We got in the car, came out here. It didn't even go home. Just went out, got into our wetsuits, bought a couple boogie boards, and just went out into the waves. And I was there at sunset, and I just remember thinking, I just have to live here. I just have to. And all of my great memories of LA, all of the times I bring anybody out here, when Natasha and I go out for anniversary. First place I ever took Natasha was to a restaurant called Mastro's. It used to be called the Chart House, I think. It's called Mastro's Ocean Club now. For many years it was sold, and that was the first place I took her in LA. And after it's been 10 days now, something like that, and I still cannot find out whether or not Mastro's Ocean Club in Malibu burned to the ground, is partially damaged, or is still standing. I saw one report that said it burned to the ground. It looks like it's in the area where it would have burned to the ground. I saw video of Mastro's saying no, it survived. But that video was not showing the rest of the destruction. It was just showing a sunset with smoke in the air. So that could have been a guy basically posting, um, you know, old video just trying to get some hits. They have after 10 days, they've not updated their website. They've not updated their answering machine. Mastro's is a chain. There's 7 or 8 of them. Roadrunner says, can't you drive down there and look? Pacific Coast Highway has been closed to traffic until yesterday, I want to say. So before I record this video, I have to find out because I'm going to be talking a lot about Mastro's. But in any event, um, uh, I I just want to talk about this what really got lost, and how I'm not the only person who feels this way. I think everybody in LA feels this way, and to lose it um, is see when you look at what actually got burned in terms of area, it's nowhere near downtown Los Angeles. Uh, it's way out on the coast, and so you would think, well, it's not a huge significant part of the city, but it's the only part of the city that people who live in the city think of when they think about living in Los Angeles. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I mean, if you think about Miami Beach, for example, Miami Beach is a relatively large area, but the only part of Miami Beach anybody thinks about when they think about Miami Beach is that little strip near Collins, just near Collins Avenue and A1A on the south end of Miami Beach. It's they burned the heart out of, and I say they not it burned. I said they burned it because it was done entirely due to um, incompetence and reservoirs that weren't refilled. It's not even a question of them not sending the water down from Sacramento. It's just the $750,000 a year head of Department of Water and Power. She just decided that, well, we probably don't have to do that right now. I'm sure it costs money to pump water into the reservoir, so they just didn't do it. And of course, Altadena is where most of the deaths were, just above Pasadena. But losing a Pacific Coast Highway is catastrophic, and it's going to be catastrophic for. We're not going to see that fully recovered for. I can't imagine it'd be less than 4 or 5 years. Uh, yeah, intentional incompetence is right. Criminal negligence is another term I would use. Um, yeah, and Mobile Moto says Gavin Newsom's down there saying he's got burning buildings behind him, and he's basically all amped up. It's like, yeah, well, we got this plan for LA 2.0. It's going to be a smart city, and it's like, how about if we'd had LA 1.0 be a smart city? You know when we needed LA to be a smart city? Back on January 6th. That's when we needed LA to be a smart city. I think Gavin Newsom's finished. He has come off, and this weird body language. He's shown what a lightweight he is. He's got the mannerisms down, but just like Kamala Harris, there's no there there. There's nothing underneath the reflexive talking points. Oh, dude, Don Vickery said Pacific Coast Highway. God, man, that's going to enter the vernacular. Um, did Murshid did he say there's no time to cast blame? Okay. Well, the more he tries to avoid responsibility, the weaker he looks. What he should have done is he should have come out. Now, this is, of course, this would require character and personality, which he doesn't have. But what he should have done is he should have immediately come out there and said, "This is a catastrophe. It's a failure of government. I'm the head of the California government. This is a failure on my part. This is a failure on my part." Now, it goes all the way down the chain of command, and we're going to investigate this whole thing, and we're going to find out what exactly went wrong. But there's no getting around the fact that I'm the governor when this enormous catastrophe happened, biggest catastrophe in California history in terms of dollars, certainly. And that's my job, and I took this job, and it happened on my watch. So I'm going to find out how it happened, and I'm going to find out what I did wrong, what other people did wrong. And we're going to get on fixing them. And if you want to recall me for this, I wouldn't blame you one bit. Now, if he'd said something like that, that's what a leader would say. That's what somebody with character would say. That's what I would say, because I'd be the truth. So the more he tries to get out of it, the worse he looks, and he's just terrible, terrible. Um, So anyway, I think the Delta smelt is in some trouble because I think California voters are no longer in the mood to watch their houses burn down to protect a sardine. It may be endangered, and I'm really at the point where I really don't particularly care. There's, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of species there are on this planet, but if the Delta smelt is one of the endangered ones, then we got photos, and we can freeze them. And by the way, if you're really worried about the loss of the genome, you can put a pond someplace, a reservoir even. Just build a little reservoir for the Delta smelt and just fish farm them. You have billions of them before you know what you're doing. Yeah, Gavin Newsom, Lady Miss Coppertone said he's a psychopath imitating human behavior. He is a psychopath. He is American psychopath. He really is Christian Bale. He really, really is Christian Bale, and and the Delta smelt is obviously not why they've de-irrigated Southern and Central California. The Central Valley of California used to be the richest agricultural land in the country, arguably in the world, and they depopulated it and pushed the farmers out because the farmers vote Republican. All of the people in the Central Valley vote Republican. The reason that they've dried out the Central Valley and deprived LA of water and electricity is because they're trying to drive out the middle class. The middle class can afford to move. They want a state that's populated by people who are so rich they don't care about what the power bill is, and so poor that they can't afford to move. That's what they want. They're an aristocracy. It's a new feudalism. That's what they want, and they're about to get their teeth handed to them. I saw Megan basically saying that she had a friend who's a super progressive. They've managed to stay friends. She's a progressive, lives in L.A., Megan Kelly, and she said the friend talked to Megan about the fires, and the super progressive friend said, "Listen, I'm talking to all my friends, and all my friends are so far left wing. We think that Jane Fonda is Attila the Hun." But she said all of us are ready to vote Republican now. All of us, all of her progressive friends. So we'll see. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying that this has shocked the city. And I mean, really shocked the city. Really, really shocked the city. And here's something to think about, just as a thought. I'm not guaranteeing this is not a prediction. But if California were to flip, the Democrats start out every presidential election with over 20% of the needed electoral votes in the bank. Conservatives start out with more than that because of Texas and Florida. If California were to flip, they'd never win again, ever. If California were to flip and you could keep Texas and Florida, which I think is very likely, then that would be the end of Democratic politics on a national level. And you say, well, there's no chance that could happen. I don't know, man. Oakland, California is now a ghost town. I think the great woke experiment. I know the great woke experiment is over. The question is, can you beat it? But just again, I'm not predicting this. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying, just think for a moment, just wallow in it for a second. That if California flipped and you started out with, what is it? I don't remember what the numbers are now. 40 something for California, and then 30 something for Texas and Florida each. You'd be halfway before the first. You'd be halfway before the first votes were counted. Anybody know last time? Can somebody check for me last time? Who won California last? Did Bush win California ever? I don't think he did, but it's a possibility. Logan Darklighter says, I just wanted to point out something that rolled up in chat that is kind of genius. Dave Dragerbov said, God chased man from paradise once. Democrats have chased them out ever since. Yeah. Castellan says in the 2030 census, which is still some way away, but nevertheless, By the trends, Texas and Florida will each gain 4 electoral college votes at the expense of California and New York. Yes, so things are getting better. They're already better than they were in 2010. So the 2008 election, after the 2008 election, 2012 election reflected the 2010 census. And then this election, the 2024 election, reflected the 2020 census, which took votes away from California and gave them to Florida. And I don't know if they gave them to Texas, but it's great. Slickapolin says, I've lived in California for years. Absolutely no one I know there is flip, but from your lips to God's ears, Bill. Well, we'll see. One of the major deficit we have in California is we have not had a good Republican candidate. Larry Elder was terrific, but Larry Elder came in on a recall election. Not only did he come in late, and not only did they keep him off of the ballot, but the problem with the recall election is Larry Elder's on the ballot against Gavin Newsom, but so are 30 other people. So everybody that basically hits some sort of magic minimum gets to be on the ballot, so that the recall vote gets split 25 different ways. If it were Larry Elder versus Gavin Newsom back in whenever that recall was, I want to say 2022, 23, something like that, 22, then there would have been a chance, But they rigged it so that there was no debates, no, and again, recall Gavin Newsom, or do you want Gavin Newsom, or do you want any one of these 25 people? So, P7 2017 says Larry has a temper, but he's a powerhouse thinker. He is. And he's got something that most politicians don't have, and that is rhetorical skill. He's defending conservative ideas all the time. So there's that. Anyway, it'll be good to be back on Monday night in the first days of the Trump administration. I did get a little more work from the guy who is working on the metahumans thing. I will have at least one thing to show. He said he's pushing through it to get the whole 45 seconds done. We'll see about that, but I'll have something like that for there. So anyway, one thing to talk about before we get to the questions. Something somewhat interesting to be terrified about. I saw this, I think it was on Anton Petrov's show. So this is a completely different subject now. So mark your journals accordingly. I'll show you. I'll show you Monday. So Anton was talking about something that's peculiar about protein structure. So protein structure is non-symmetrical. There are left-handed proteins and right-handed proteins, and all of the proteins on Earth are left-handed. They're levo as opposed to dextro-based proteins. And so all of the life on Earth is left-handed protein-based. Now it's a science fiction staple, and I first saw this in the incredible Traveler 2100 series. Traveler 2100 was like a reboot of Traveler, which is a role-playing game. 2100 I thought was just brilliant. They had the aliens in there were brilliant. It was just a tremendously great game, and I take a lot of inspiration from the colonies from Traveler 2100. But one of the things they talked about in Traveler 2100 was that it was they looked at it as a coin toss, because it seems to be a coin toss that either the left-handed or the right-handed proteins are going to form, and there's no way to tell which. It's just a flip of the coin. So there would be several planets in Traveler 2300 that would have a biosphere and have its own food chain, its own plants, its own animals, all of that stuff. None of which would be digestible by humans, nor would humans be digestible to the local predators. So you could gorge yourself, just eat and eat and eat. If you had a shortcake made out of right-handed proteins, you could eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and you'd starve to death, because your body has left-handed enzymes, left-handed It develops left-handed acids, and the entire digestive system is based on levo-based biology. Well, Anton Petrov was saying that scientists have now made right-handed proteins in the laboratory, and they find out that if you take something, I don't remember what the example was for the sake of it, let's just say it was something like cottage cheese or something like that. They said it wasn't cottage cheese, but they said that strangely enough, something that's made out of right-handed proteins smells different than the way left-handed proteins do. It's probably because smell is the only sense that directly connects to the environment. In other words, when you see something, you're interpreting something through your organs of your eyes. The same with your ears and touch. But smell, the molecules go directly to your membrane. There's no nose drum, So he was talking about something called mirror. So these are mirror proteins, right-handed proteins. He was saying that scientists within the next 10 years might be able to create mirror life, which would be life that is based on right-handed proteins. And he said that if you let these things out of the lab, you would not be able to stop them. Viruses can't stop them because viruses are left-handed. Our immune systems would be absolutely unable to recognize them. That a right-handed bacteria that got out of the lab would be able to essentially infest the entire Earth, and there'd be no stopping it. And this is one of I was inspired to talk about this because Eric Blake mentioned in the run-up to the show. Once again, scientists. It's not a question of whether they can do something; it's whether they should do something. Now, something was poking around in the back of my head while I was watching this. I couldn't put my finger on it, and then I realized, okay, wait a minute. These right-handed proteins that can't be stopped. These right-handed life forms, right-handed bacteria, dextro-based bacteria, that there's no defense against. What's wrong with this picture? What is it? What am I missing? And I realized this actually works both ways, because there's nothing for it to eat. Infidel 42 just got there just the same time I did. It's got nothing to eat. A number of people have picked that up. So he was going on and on about this whole thing. Is like, my God, we got to stop this. But then the question is, they got to eat too, and there is no right-handed protein for them to eat. So they would just basically starve to death. I don't know why Anton didn't pick up on that. There may be a reason. It might be engineered so it can break down left-handed proteins, but I don't know. Anyway, this idea of scientists, it's just the last little thing I'm going to say about this. I'm getting into the questions, but throughout the course of my life, living in growing up in the Cold War and having the threat of nuclear weapons over our heads, and that just has such a profound effect for anybody who lived through that. It's pretty much baby boomers now at this point, maybe some millennials. I'm sorry, some Gen Xers, because I'm a late boomer and a late bloomer. But the end of the world was always going to come from the military. That we're so warlike that we would end up destroying ourselves because of those horrible generals. Carl Sagan basically preached this, that science was the only hope, that science is the only hope to save us from militarism and war that will destroy the human species through nuclear weapons. But what is beginning to look more likely with AI and all of these gain-of-function research things with viruses and so on, it may not be the generals that kill us at all. It may be the scientists. It's beginning to look more and more likely that one person was talking about this right-handed life thing and said maybe that's why we don't see any intelligent life in the universe, because scientists push the limits to the point where they create things that destroy themselves in the interest of knowledge rather than the interest of conquest. I thought, man, there's something to that. That really may, in fact, be possible. The thing about it is, this may be the epitaph for the human race. Maybe the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I certainly I know for a certain fact there are bad actors out there who are doing things like biological weapons research and using all these gene splicing technologies in order to create killer viruses or tailored viruses. But most scientists are looking for solutions that either benefit mankind or pure knowledge that advances the state of understanding and technology and so on. But the problem is, I mean, when I hear guys who are leading the AI charge saying, I mean, the top AI scientists saying there's a 50-50 chance that this will exterminate the human race, but the other 50% chance is that it will open up a golden era. I'm thinking, I don't like those odds, man. I don't even like anything close to those odds. I got a couple super chats I'll get to in a second. The there was a discussion during the run up to the Trinity test that the detonation of a nuclear weapon might start a chain reaction in the atmosphere that would essentially cause the entire atmosphere to burn. And they said the chance of this was extremely remote. And some people were saying, well, if it's extremely remote, if it's not zero, then let's not do it. They didn't realize, they didn't have the background that we have now in terms of, in 1944-45, the scientific community had no idea just how tough the Earth is. That's the one thing that we've gotten, mostly from a Shoemaker, who was the first guy to really posit, that really champion the idea that lunar craters were meteoric, and that meteoric impacts had deeply affected the Earth's history. And I'm pretty sure Shoemaker was one of the first guys that did that, and lived to see, I think, those comets striking Jupiter, Shoemaker-Levy. But Shoemaker was certainly one of the first guys to be really talking about this. And so when you realize that the Chicxulub impact released more energy than a billion H-bombs, then you realize there's very little that we can do to the Earth that the Earth can't recover from, including raising CO2 from 452 parts per million to 460 parts per million. That the Earth is an incredibly robust system that has, and that biology is astonishingly resilient, and that biology provides a negative feedback loop that keeps Earth right where it's supposed to. Biology makes the Earth habitable. It's a round trip ticket. The carbon dioxide levels during 80 million years ago were 3,000 parts per million. That meant there were lots of plants everywhere. A lot of ice melted. There was an inland ocean where Kansas was. Okay, and then the only thing that nearly killed the Earth was when we went through Snowball Earth, more like 80,000 years ago, or at least the last ice age. If CO2 levels get too low, then the plants die, and if the plants die, then you're stuck. Lord Bios says biology is anti-entropy. That's why Lord Bios is one of our most highly respected members here, because he's an actual, honest-to-God biological scientist. And that's a really beautiful way of putting it. Biology is anti-entropy. Biology is a series of chemical reactions that take solar energy and create more complex molecules out of essentially nothing. So, but the Earth is a tough old bird. She's a battle axe. She's taken stuff that's wiped out 3/4 of the species on Earth, and it just recovers. And once those ecological holes are eliminated, once those big dinosaurs go extinct, the speed at which the replacement species occupy those niches is, in terms of geological time, is just a flash in the pan. I was working with a friend, talk about the fires. I was working with a friend of mine on an animated show, which we never really got very far, but a friend of mine and I were comedy writers back in Gainesville when we were doing our sketch comedy show, a guy named Alex Campbell. And Alex and I were working on a show called Topanga Drive-In. And And the idea was that there was a drive-in theater in Topanga Canyon, which is gone now. Topanga Canyon's burned to the ground. There was an art community in Topanga Canyon. They would open up roadside kiosks, and you could get strawberries that were picked that day that were the size of plums, and all of that stuff in this little artistic community in Topanga Canyon, and a bunch of weirdos in there, but good weirdos, hippy dippy weirdos, not meth, cooking drug gangs. Although wouldn't be surprised if they were cooking some meth in Topanga Canyon as well. Hi everybody, hey Epic Guest. So anyway, the idea behind Topanga Canyon, behind Topanga Drive-In, was that in the 1960s there was a drive-in at the base of Topanga Canyon, and that the drive-in theater had long gone out of business, and that it was now a trailer park, and a trailer park for the weirdest people. It was going to be an animated series for the weirdest losers in the world. This thing was tucked way back in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knew it was even back there, really. And so we had all these different groups of people that were in there. There was one guy who was, because Alex was from Alabama, one guy was the sewage king of some small town in Alabama, moved to California, and then his business rival, moved out there too. These two guys were both at each other's throats, but all these guys, and I pitched the idea of this one guy who was a scientist. He was a microbiologist and so on, genius, living out there in a trailer in Topanga Canyon, and he was able to reconstitute tyrannosaur DNA. So there was actually a tyrannosaur that was living in the woods around Topanga Canyon. But his entire goal in life, this is the point of what I'm trying to say here, his entire reason for getting up in the morning was that this professor was determined to exterminate all life on Earth, and he would not settle for anything less than that. So he would say things like, look, making a virus to eliminate humans, that's child's play. I do that in my sleep. It'd take me an hour and a half to cook up a virus that would kill all human life on Earth. Finding something that would kill all the mammals is harder, but again, that's pretty simple. Getting everything on the land is not too bad. You can inject stuff in the water. You can probably get most of the sea life. He says it's those damn fumaroles at the bottom of the ocean. Those things are getting lethal poisons to all of the fumaroles on the Earth. I just can't figure out how to do it. Those life forms down there that are thermal based. They're taking their energy not from sunlight. They're taking it from chemical reactions with the hot springs that are coming out of the Earth's core. And so the guy's basically saying, he gets questioned about that. You're trying. So why haven't you started? He said, what's the point if I can't get all of it? I mean, what's the point of me killing off all the people and killing off all the animals and all the fish if I can't get to the fumaroles at the bottom of the ocean? It's pointless. It'll just repopulate. So that's why we're still here, because he's heartbroken by the fact that the biology of the planet is essentially, he's talking about how they drilled a hole down and they found life between, sedimentary layers, 2.5 miles deep. He said, there's no way to get to that stuff. So there's no point about even trying. It's just so depressing. I'm working on it, though. He's working on it. It's a clever idea. Could have gone someplace, but anyway. All right, so we apparently have a ton of questions tonight, so we're going to get digging into those guys directly. I take this so seriously, I shall open a new tab just for you. Don't say I don't do anything for you, folks. My life is a life of service. Let's bring up BillWhittle.com and find out what's going on here. You could be a recurring villain on Major Mace Mattingly. Oh, by the way, while we're waiting, put on my cogitation spectacles here, and I missed 2 super chats. Sad Wings Raging says, first, look up the degrowth movement. That is the left's Democrats' green initiatives. That's right. The Delta Smelt is cover to depopulate and re-feudalize California. Yes, the degrowth movement. No more dams, no more power plants. We're going to destroy dams. We're going to close power plants. All of those people, I think those people were done before the fires. I think the Trump revolution is, the drill baby drill thing is, I think the tide has turned. It's not over. It's nothing like over, but I think that the left has had everything go their way and lost. That's what I genuinely believe, and I think the evidence for that's virtually overwhelming. Second, get the book Smoking Them Out that will explain what the environmental government industrial complex is all about. Okay, I'll try and take a look at that. That sounds like my kind of stuff. Put up a lot of that. And then there's just yet another mundane, routine, boring super chat from John Eden for $99.99. Every episode he shows up and contributes $100 to the cause. And I say this every time because I don't know what to say other than I don't know how to thank you, John. It's a vitamin shot in the arm for me every time. And we're very, very grateful. Not just me, but I talked to Natasha about this, and she's constantly blown away by it. Biden unilaterally declared a 28th Amendment. I'm pretty sure Biden doesn't have the power to change the Constitution unilaterally. He can do whatever he wants to. The crazy old man. He's going to be making clouds illegal, or something along those lines. So anyway, I'm just going to leave that go. But thank you so much, John. We never get bored of it. We never get over it. I just never cease to be amazed. So thank you very much for that. Very much. Okay, here we are. Was I in harm's way, Selena? No, I wasn't. No, I mentioned at the beginning when I started talking about the fires that it's actually a relatively small part of the city, although it's 5 times bigger than downtown. By the way, here's something you need to know about Los Angeles. When you look at a picture of Los Angeles, there's the LA basin, and then there's a San Fernando Valley. I live in the valley. A lot of people live in the valley. In fact, if the valley was an independent city, it'd be, I think, the 3rd or 4th biggest city in America. It's a big hunk of neighborhoods up there. But if you look at Los Angeles basin, Los Angeles is a city that was like it's like LA is like a normal city that somebody dropped from orbit, and it just went straight down and just went like that. There's a little cluster of downtown, which is kind of like the little bump in the center of a crater, and then the rest of the city just went. It's absolutely flat. There's no buildings out there much more than 2 or 3 stories because of the earthquakes. I mean, you can build skyscrapers, but generally speaking, most buildings are. When Natasha came here, she couldn't believe it was a city. She was driving around. It's like there's nothing. There are no tall buildings, except for downtown, and in places like Century City, and and so on. So it's but the flatlands don't burn. In order to really understand it, you really need to drive the freeways and see on either side there's nothing but dried tumbleweed like weeds. They're just brown. And you look at this and you realize there is no better fuel. There's nothing that could fuel a fire better than this stuff. Because not only is there tons of it, it's really just tons of it, but it's also bone dry, and more importantly, it has tremendously high surface area. It's just nothing but little fingers of twigs. It's perfect material. Tumbleweeds are it's not quite tumbleweeds, it's thinner than that. But if you think about a tumbleweed is got so much surface area. There's so much oxygen can get into a fire on a burned out tumbleweed that they're incendiary devices. And the entire city is bounded by hills and mountains, and those hills and mountains are flammable. Very flammable. Lapco92 with a super chat says, what are the chances John Eden is actually Natasha just paying Google $30 a stream to keep you occupied so she has some peace and quiet twice a week? Well, if Natasha is spending the same kind of money that John Eden is spending, then she's in for a discussion. But that's something I'll look into on the download. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to check the finances. Looking for secret accounts and transfers that happen late at night and all the rest of that stuff. All right, here we go. TSL questions for 116.25, which would have been yesterday. We had to push it back, so we're grateful. Let's see what we got here. Okay, I've heard we got 13, so I have a quick look. We got an Eric Blake, we got a Bob Knife, we got an Ian Nolan, we got a Janie Waterman, we got another Janie Waterman, we got a Roadrunner, we got a Marusha, a Steve Young, a Guy Balo, a Road Rider, a John, a Ray Juarez, a Bob Knife again. Okay. I'm going to do the last one first because it's easy. Bob Knife. Say it ain't so, Bill. Did I hear you say on Monday Night Show that you put pineapple on pizza? I do, but John, you missed the key point here. I understand your outrage and your fully justifiable disbelief and anger. And maybe I wasn't clear enough when I talked about my pizza, which is very, very light on cheese, but essentially almost no cheese. My pizza is a form of Hawaiian pizza that has pineapple on it. The ham is gone, and it's replaced by double bacon. So it's a marinara sauce, thick crust with pineapple and double bacon, and it's a little bit tangy, and it's bloody marvelous. But it's essentially a bacon pizza with pineapple in it. And the pineapple is there to cleanse the palate so that you can taste the bacon. It's damn delicious. So I don't want any accusations about, my sexual orientation or anything like that. I didn't just say a pineapple pizza. I said a pizza that has pineapple on it. Not spicy, but robust is a term they use at Domino's. Robust marinara sauce and lots of bacon. So I think double or triple bacon more than makes up for pineapple. And by the way, I'll counter Bob. I'll counter with, I don't know what your favorite pizza is, but if it doesn't have bacon on it, then you're not in any position to throw stones. That's the way I look at it. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. Now that I can relax. Okay, here we go. Eric Blake. Tonight, the case of the sardine shish kebab. Submitted for your approval is a modest proposal for the most effective matter of protest for the many victims of the Los Angeles Inferno. Ideally performed en masse, albeit on a somewhat individual basis, the protest in question consists of the following steps. So here's how you protest the fires, according to Eric Blake. Step 1. Gather the necessary tackle and equipment and skill set for the successful gathering of bait fish in large quantities. Step 2. Acquire a smartphone or other equipment necessary for video and audio recording. Step 3. Proceed to the California Delta. Step 4. Record the successful fishing for significant quantities of Delta smelt. Step 5. Bring said haul to your place of residence or campsite with proper campfire equipment. Remember, only you can prevent forest fires. Step 6. Record the successful cooking and consumption of the aforementioned Delta smelt with proper seasoning as desired. Step 7. Post said recordings online, preferably in a series format with a simple how to fish for and cook or eat Delta smelt titles. Note, for ideal effectiveness, the aforementioned videos must be played completely straight with no political, social, or other context or explanation whatsoever within the descriptions or the videos themselves. They must be plain, simple, how to fish, cook, eat, X videos, nothing more, nothing less. The Delta smelt cannot be fished for because they're this big, and when I say fish for, you can't use a line because they don't make hooks that small. That's how insignificant this bloody fish is. I don't think it'd be worth depriving Southern California of water for the frickin' blue marlin, let alone this. And it's an ugly little fish too. They were imported from Japan. Is that true, Steve Whoop? Steve Whoop says the Delta smelt was imported from Japan in 1959. So not even native. Seriously? Well, see, I for a moment there I was outraged because my sense of reason was outraged. I was outraged because that sounded even more ridiculous. But then I caught myself and realized it doesn't matter whether they're imported or not. It doesn't matter whether there's 100 billion of them in Japan. It's not about the Delta smelt. The Delta smelt has nothing to do with it. It's about deconstructing California and reducing it to a feudal state of elite, small number of elitists, and a large number of gardeners. That's basically it. So it's the Delta smelt. I think is the big loser in the LA fires situation. All right, so let's go next to Bob Knife. Airbus versus Boeing. Did free enterprise fail? That's an interesting question. Not a big deal, really, but it would upset my grandpa, so for the record, my last name rhymes with beef. Bob Neef. Sorry, Bob. I was wondering about that for the long time, because it didn't look exactly like Knife, but that was the best I could do it. Bob Neef. I got to remember that next time. If it turns out I forget, I am putting the hall monitors on notice to say if I say Bob Knife next time, somebody please correct me. It's Bob Neef. Um, you know, well, first of all, Airbus is heavily government subsidized by the European Union, so it's not free enterprise on the Airbus side. On the Boeing side, yeah, I think I think that is not an unfair thing to say. Um, I think uh, I think that's a fair analysis. See, the thing about conservatism is a fanatical devotion to the idea of reality. We have three weapons. Um, clearly, clearly, a major mistake was made that was not just a bad business decision, but a decision that affected public safety. When when Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, Boeing was known, and we've covered this ground before, so I'll just make this brief. Boeing was known as an engineers company. In other words, let's build great airplanes and we'll make whatever money we make off of building great airplanes, which turns out to be a ton of money because they own the market. McDonnell Douglas was known as a financial company. It's a bottom line company. So the the uh, the DC-10, for example, back when McDonnell Douglas was Douglas Corporation, DC-10 was a airplane that was rushed out in order to beat the Lockheed L-1011. I think they started development on the DC-10 about a year after the L-1011 and got it to market before the L-1011. And the DC-10 had a terrible safety record because it was run by people who wanted to beat the market rather than build a really excellent jetliner. Uh, they did an upgrade of the DC-10, which became the MD-11 because by that time Douglas had been bought by McDonnell. So McDonnell Douglas MD-11, which was better airplane than the DC-10, but by that time engine reliability had improved to the point where you didn't need three engines, you could get by on two, and then once you got two engines, anything with three engines just not efficient enough. You're burning too much fuel with three engines, so there's no economic reason to fly a three-engine jet, which means that the MD-11 was doomed, even if it was better than the DC-10. But the DC-10 was an airplane that people just wouldn't fly in because of the number of accidents, terrible accidents caused by the DC-10. So when Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, it looked like they were buying out well, that's exactly what they were doing. They were buying out their principal domestic competition in order to have an American monopoly, and that left only Boeing and Airbus. But what happened was Boeing not only bought McDonnell Douglas's assets and turned what was then the DC-9 into the DC-9 got upgraded to the MD-80, and then I want to say the MD-83, but basically the DC-9 was like a two-engines in the rear airplane. And then when Boeing bought it, they renamed it the 717 because there was no 717. There was a 707, which was the airliner that changed the world. And then the 727, which is my favorite Boeing. I just think that the 727 is just a cool looking jet. I just loved the 727. I thought it was a fantastic. I had a toy 727 when I was growing up, and I just love the 727. I think it's just a really cool looking jet, and really changed the world because it was a short field jet. And then along came the 737, which turned out to be the design route of the definitive short range, relatively short range commercial transport. 737 is the most successful plane in history. I think it's inarguably the most successful plane in history, uh, and um, and is an excellent design. Excellent design. Um, and the 737 series has changed the world. Um, but when they bought McDonnell Douglas, they also bought McDonnell Douglas's corporate culture. So essentially, the way I've heard it is that if you want to look at it from a management point of view, McDonnell Douglas bought Boeing using Boeing's own money. Um, when when the 747, I want to say, launched in 1970, I want to say that was the first flight. It was 69 or 70. 747 changed the world. That was the first, not only was it the first wide body jet, but the 747 was the first jet to use the high bypass engines, which are why you get thicker contrails. 747 high bypass engines um, have been repeated on every aircraft since then. They're far more efficient. If you look at the older jets, like the 707, the jet engines are very thin, long and thin. The 747's got much wider engines because it's actually turning a fan. It's essentially the high bypass jet engine is a turboprop engine with a blade. Instead of having 4 blades, it's got 40. So it's basically pushing a lot of air around the engine, not just through the engine. So anyway, all these advances that Boeing made, um, but Boeing inherited the cut corners, make as much money philosophy of McDonnell Douglas, and it stopped being an engineers company and started being a bean counter company. So they would start firing senior engineers who knew what they were doing and hire younger engineers because younger engineers are cheaper. And Salinas Girl here says McDonnell Douglas tried to move to a southern right to work state, and Pelosi stopped that. Um, they they are all of this came to a head with the 737 Max. Now the 737 Max is a very there's two things going on here. Okay, I'll talk briefly about the 737 Max, but basically, even though the 737 Max has the problems I'm about to mention, the problems run deeper than the 737 Max. Boeing became convinced that instead of building everything in the Boeing plant in Seattle, they moved out of Washington. They had the largest structure in the world by area, I think by square footage. I think the Boeing plant in Seattle was the largest structure in the world by square footage. And they moved. They moved their corporate headquarters to Chicago, of all places. Nothing corrupt about being in Chicago. When they left Seattle, that's when Boeing started its downward slide. So the 737 Max, I'll tell you the basic story of the 737 Max. As they continued to upgrade the 737 basic airframe, so I have to go back further. I flew experimental airplanes. I flew a Long Easy for, I don't know, got 400 hours, I guess, in a Long Easy, something like that. And the Long Easy is not a certified airplane. In other words, you have an inspector come out and check your work to make sure that the plane is fundamentally airworthy and the parts aren't going to fall off of it. But the experimental aircraft category in the United States basically says that you can build and design and build your own airplane. And as long as it doesn't look like it's going to fall apart, then you'll have to fly the first 40 hours within a certain number of miles, I want to say 3 miles, of the airport that you built it at, in case parts do fall off of it. But it's still one of the experimental aircraft category is one of the very few areas left in the United States government that is still basically about freedom. Because basically what it's saying is, look, the FAA is going to make sure that the chance of you crashing into somebody's house is low. But if you want to go out and kill yourself in your own airplane design, then that's more or less fine with us. Now, you can carry passengers on an experimental airplane. 1 passenger, I think, is the limit. Although, no, that may not be true. That may not be true. You might be able to carry at least 4. But in any event, and certainly it's true you can carry at least 4, because I've flown a four-person experimental airplane, a Velocity. I've got a couple hundred hours in that too. But when you get in an airplane that's not certified, it has to say experimental on it, and that every passenger in the airplane has to be able to see a placard that says this is a home-built experimental aircraft that has not been certified by the government. You're flying at your own risk. I love the fact that they let you do that. Now, if you took something like the Long Easy, which is a two-seat experimental airplane, which you can just build and fly, to certify that plane would cost millions of dollars, because you would have to build a number of them, and then you'd have to prove to the FAA that it can take this many stresses. You'd have to do all kinds of testing. You'd have to source all the parts. Assembling it would have to have the parts sourced. Assembling it would have to be inspected. You couldn't just build it in your garage. You can see how certification would cost millions and millions of dollars to certify an airplane. And when you get to commercial jetliners, it's probably pushing $1 billion to certify an airplane. So the 737 MAX story is, the 737 started out as, they called it the Fat Man because it was so short relative to its width. It's the same width as a 727, if I recall correctly, or 707. It's not a wide-body jet. It's just a short little two-engine jet with the old-style thin, long, high bypass engines. Low bypass engines under the wings. Then they put the high bypass engines on it. But the 737 sits so low to the ground that if you look at the engine nacelles on a 737, instead of them being round, they're actually flattened across the bottom because of the ground clearance. So they keep expanding the 737. There's a whole bunch of really cool traveler questions over there. I would love to come back to, but I don't want to lose my place here. So the 737 extended the fuselage. Now it doesn't look like the Fat Man anymore. Then they put the new high bypass engines under it, so it's got more power. And the 737-200 and the 737-300, 400, 500, 600, 700. Now we're up to the 900 series, I want to say. And the plane kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But my understanding is, I might be wrong about this, but my understanding of it is that they never had to recertify the airplane from the ground up. They just had to basically show the FAA that the changes that they were making were relatively minor changes that didn't fundamentally affect the overall flight characteristics of the airplane. And once the 737-400 is certified, then whatever additions you make to the 500 series are relatively minor, so they're using the 400 as the base, not the 100, so you get the idea, right? Evolution. Okay? Evolution. When they got to the 737 MAX, my understanding is that the changes had become so significant that they changed the center of gravity and the overall flight characteristics of the aircraft to the point where if they hadn't done something, they would have had to recertify the airplane. This is my understanding. I may be wrong about this. I'm not going to the grave on this one. This is just how the story comes together to me anecdotally as I remember it. The engines got bigger, it affected the center of gravity and so on. And so rather than spending the money to recertify this airplane as an entirely new aircraft type, what they did was they changed the flight software so that it would prevent the 737 getting into these dangerous areas of the flight envelope that these new design made possible. Now, also in this equation, and this is politically incorrect, but I've never been particularly afraid about that, they were exporting a lot of 737s, a lot. They were going all around the world. And when they were getting to these third world countries, they were finding out the 737s were being flown by pilots with, some of these guys had 400 hours. I mean, I've got 1,000 hours in an instrument rating. There would need to be an awful lot of training for me before I was willing, or any other party was willing, for me to carry, a couple hundred people behind me. I mean, I think I'd be a good airline pilot, but that's just because I'm a good private pilot, and when I flew my private pilot test, the instructor said, well, you easily flew to commercial pilot standards. It's still a step below the airline transport pilot rating, but in any event, I would be a good pilot because I'm a good airman. I learned in gliders. I stick and rudder, seat of the pants kind of flying. I know how to fly an airplane. I know how an airplane feels. I can tell how fast an airplane is going by the feel of it and the sound of it without looking at the airspeed indicator. But the pilots that they were getting in third world countries were people who were training on checklists, and as long as they followed the checklist and everything went according to plan, then they were more or less capable of checklisting the airplane from point A to point B. But anytime something happened, anytime that there was a mishap, when you really need a pilot, they just didn't have the training. They just didn't have it. Ray Berry says, totally lost on what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the history of the 737 MAX and the demise of Boeing and their safety record. So Boeing had a problem, and the problem was that the 737 was a great jet, but they were exporting them, and there were a number of accidents that were due to untrained pilots in the third world crashing 737s because they did not have enough training. So on the 737 MAX, what they did was they installed a new set of sensors. They were angle of attack sensors. The angle of attack is a measure of the wing versus the relative wind. So the wing is moving through the air, and one way of visualizing the wing moving through the air is to visualize the wing standing still and the air moving over the wing. It's the same exact difference. The airplane doesn't care. So as you increase the angle of attack on the wing, you're creating the more and more curvature over the wing, and that generates more and more lift. But when you reach a certain critical angle of attack, that airflow over the wing detaches. That's called an aerodynamic stall, and the plane's not flying anymore. It doesn't lose lift slowly, it just plain stops flying. And a lot of these pilots, low-hour, untrained pilots in third world countries, were stalling 737s and crashing them into the ground and killing people. So what Boeing did to correct the problem was they basically put an angle of attack they already had angle of attack indicators in there, but they put a new angle of attack sensor system in there that basically pushed the nose down without the pilot commanding it. It basically said the plane is in an aerodynamic stall. If this continues, the plane will crash. So better to put the nose down so that at least you have an airplane rather than several 100,000 pounds of scrap aluminum that's 5,000 feet in the air. Because an airplane that's not flying is not your friend. So what this software did was it prevented people from stalling the airplane by pushing the nose down. Now, a number of cases when they had the two 737 MAXs, both of them with third world airlines, was that the airplanes were taking off and there was uncommanded pitch down of the nose. This software was telling the pilots, wasn't telling them anything. The airplane was forcing the nose down because the airplane thought it was in a stall or approaching a stall. Now, I'm not as familiar with the details of both of these, but the one thing I do know for a certain fact is that the manuals for the 737 basically said if the airplane enters an uncommanded pitch down, in other words, if this thing kicks in and pitches the nose of the airplane down, it's using the trim system to do this, then the first thing that the pilots must do is must pull the circuit breakers for the trim system, which are right here. They're not like hidden someplace. These things are right there. So if there's an uncontrollable pitch down on the airplane, step one in the emergency manuals, and by the way, emergency procedures, like what to do in an engine failure, are required to be memorized. It's not something you have time to get a book out for. Flip me to page 17 where I can find out about this. Certain emergency procedures are required to be memorized, and this was one of them. And on the case where they lost those two 737 MAXs in, was it Ethiopia and I forget where the other one was, they were flying the airplane. All of a sudden the airplane is pitching down. They're pulling back as hard as they can on the stick. They're fighting the airplane. And they fought the airplane for 10 minutes, 15 minutes before they finally lost control. But the one thing they didn't do was step one on the what to do with an uncontrolled down pitch thing, which is they didn't pull the frickin' circuit breakers. So that's is that pilot error or is that bad design? And the answer is yes. Yes. Now, what's especially infuriating and what made a lot of people angry, including myself, is is that they didn't tell American pilots about this. They told them about the circuit breaker thing, but they didn't tell them that they had installed this system that was basically designed to deal with undertrained pilots. And that's inexcusable. That's my understanding of the 737 MAX story. So the 737 MAX got grounded. And then everybody heard that the 737 MAX was a problem airplane and nobody wanted to fly in it anymore. And that was years ago. And then all of the manufacturing decisions that Boeing made as a company started catching up with them. That's when you find out the doors start coming off in flight, because the doors weren't assembled in the same. The doors were made one place, and the fuselage was made someplace else. And they're using the cheapest engineers they can find rather than the best engineers they can find in order to save money. And now Boeing has a reputation for shoddiness, which they've earned. And their handling of this is why the 737 MAX issue is so complex. The reason that they didn't tell American pilots about this is because of political correctness. Because the bottom line is, these previous Boeings were crashing because in the third world, these pilots were undertrained. So it was a question of Boeing basically saying, it's these Ethiopian pilots that are the problem. It's not the airplane, it's the fact that these guys can't fly. Well, that's obviously white supremacy. Okay. Well, that's the convoluted story as I understand it from geostationary orbit without all the details, but that's Mike Rowe's words, that's the way I heard it. So now they couldn't just come out and say why they were putting this system in. But there's also the business of them not wanting to pay for recertifying the 737 MAX, which not only is a very expensive thing, it's also extremely time consuming. Best way to think of it is to think of it as getting a new drug to market. It's that level of regulation. And so the government is a big player in this, not only because it shouldn't take this long. It shouldn't take 10 years to bring a drug to market. It shouldn't take 10 years to recertify an airplane. It should take 1 year or less. Roadrunner 87123 says there's a Mentor pilot did an outstanding video explaining about the first 737 MAX accident. Mentor pilot's got a great channel. It's Mentor pilot, and he's is he German or Swiss? I think something. He's really great guy. I want to read that. I want to watch that story. Lapco92 says, wow, never heard that story. I just hope the execs were able to retire with golden parachutes in time. Yeah, it'd be nice if they supplied regular parachutes to the passengers as well. So look, he's Norwegian? Oh, even better. I'm a Boeing guy. I'm still a Boeing guy. I like Boeing because despite this stuff that I just mentioned, Boeing, at least prior to McDonnell Douglas acquisition, Boeing trusts the pilot more than the airplane. There's a fundamental difference between Airbus and Boeing. And the fundamental difference is that in an abnormal situation, Airbus believes that the airplane knows better what to do, and Boeing believes that the pilot knows better what to do. Airbus's attitude was, a lot of airplane crashes were caused by pilot errors, so we will not let the pilots get the airplane into a situation that the airplane can't recover from. Boeing's position is, we're not going to have the pilot put in a command that the airplane won't obey. It's an entirely, it really is a difference between European and American thinking, honestly. Somebody ought to write a big essay about this, because that really is a cultural difference. Boeing believes that software engineers in Brussels or wherever the hell they are know more about what the airplane can do than the guy who's flying the airplane in the middle of the storm or whatever the case may be. And so the classic Airbus accident is the Air France flight 227 Air France. It's a flight from South America to Paris over the Atlantic they have a relief crew. So there's two crews on long distance flights. There's a primary crew and the relief crew, and the primary crew does the takeoff and gets to cruise, and they fly for 4 hours, and then they go sleep for 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever, and then the relief crew takes over, and so on. So there was this co-pilot. It was in the right hand seat of the Airbus A340, maybe. It was a big Airbus. It was equivalent of a 767, a big one. And they're out over the North Atlantic in a perfectly healthy airplane, and their pitot tubes start. Was it an A380? Are you sure about that? Because I've flown an A380. Which one has the four engines? I thought the A380 had the four engines. No, no, no. There's the super giant one, which I think is the A380. Then they've got a smaller four engine one, which is the A340 maybe. So I think this was an A360. It certainly wasn't the A380. I think this was the A360 because I think the A340 is a four engine smaller airplane. It doesn't matter. It's an Airbus, right? So what happened is they're over the North Atlantic, and the airplane starts to indicate that its angle of attack is too high and that it's stalling. So the co-pilot pushes his stick forward. So the plane starts descending. It's what you would do if you're in a high angle of attack stall. But they're looking at the instruments. They can't make any sense out of it. Turned out that their airspeed indication had frozen over. So the plane thinks it's flying more slowly than the plane really was. So the plane is saying push the nose down. So the pilot pushes the nose down. The co-pilot pushes the nose down. And this is the thing that to this day I will never understand. No matter how long I live, I'll never ever for the life of me understand this. Try to figure this out. On a Boeing airplane, the pilot and the co-pilot have yokes that are mechanically linked to each other. So if the pilot does this, the co-pilot's yoke are going to do that. And if they have to fight the controls, they pull back together, they push together, these things are linked. On the Airbus, there are two side sticks, and these things are not mechanically linked, and they're not electronically linked. So what caused that crash was the pilot was realizing that they were getting a false airspeed indication, that they were diving into the ocean. He's trying to pull back on the stick. So he's pulling back on the stick because the plane is going into the water. And the co-pilot the whole time had his stick forward because he's convinced that they're in a stall. And the frickin' software didn't say the pilot has command, and the software didn't even say pick one. It averaged them out. It said, well, the co-pilot is in a full dive. The pilot is in a full climb trying to save this thing from hitting the water. The co-pilot's panicking. Air France 447 and an A330. Thank you, Roadrunner. And so these two control things are averaged out. How do you average them out? To the life of me, if somebody's pulling back hard, if the captain of the airplane's pulling back hard and the co-pilot is pushing forward hard, for the software to say, well, we'll just assume straight and level then, is just beyond me. It's just beyond me. Yes, it's the Air France flight, the A330, thanks. So it just flew itself into the ocean, killed everybody. Perfectly good airplane, no mechanical problems. Co-pilot panicked. They had an airspeed indication malfunction, and they just plain couldn't figure out what was going on. So they flew it into the water. That can't happen on a Boeing. I'm a Boeing guy. But in any event, Boeing has done unbelievable damage to its brand because of its cost cutting and its the shareholders come first attitude, so anyway, the whole question from Bob Neef was, see, I got it right, was did free enterprise fail? Yes. When Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, they bought a corporate culture that was not engineering and safety based or even aviation based. They bought one that was bottom line based, and now they have to try and recover, and they don't show signs of having gotten the message yet. So we'll see. Oh, they had a horizon indicator. They just didn't. They panicked. And when the captain, who was sleeping, finally came in, said, "Get out of my seat," got into the left seat, was pulling back on the stick. He can't figure out why the plane isn't climbing. Because he can't believe that the co-pilot could have spent the whole time with full stick forward. The pilot's saying that we've lost flight control. I'm pulling back on the stick and we're not getting a climb. The idea that the co-pilot's got this thing commanding a full dive is inconceivable to him. It's inconceivable to me. How do you average the controls out? That's simply, it's beyond imagination to me. Beyond imagination. That seems to me to be the worst possible case. If I designed the software, I would have the captain have control, and then maybe have a button where the co-pilot has control if the captain's lost his mind or died on the stick or something. But averaging the controls, how do you land an airplane with two pilots averaging the controls? It's just insane. It's just nuts. It's nuts. Moving on. We're going to be here a long time. Bill, since you guys discussed fixing elections, I'm going to boost this once more. An IEEE voting standard that keeps clear track of total votes counted and most importantly lets voters take back a receipt that they can take back to county records and prove their own vote wasn't switched in any way while still preserving vote anonymity. And here's a link to secret ballot receipts. I don't know what else to say about this, Ian, rather than this sounds like a great idea. You should be able to take a receipt with you. That's a grand idea. You get a receipt when, in Mitch Hedberg's immortal words, you buy a donut, you get a receipt. Let's not bring paperwork into this. I'll give you money, you give me the donut. I can't imagine a case where I ever have to prove that I owned a donut. Don't say I didn't buy that donut. I got the paperwork right here. Yeah, here's your receipt. This is your vote. Here's your vote. Here's a copy of your vote. And at any time, you should be able to go down and say, here's receipt number 674983273. How did that vote register? Well, it registered it registered as a vote for Donald Trump and blah blah blah. It's like, okay, good, that's who I voted for. But if it comes back, you got the receipt, and you take it back there, and the receipt says you voted for Biden when you voted for Trump. Now you've got evidence, and you can testify under oath that your vote was tampered with. I think a receipt is a great idea. Terrific idea. Yeah, R.I.P. Mitch. Mitch Hedberg was just one of my favorites. In fact, I'd binge watched all of Mitch Hedberg's comedy. I said, how did I miss this guy? How did I miss him? I'd watched virtually everything he'd done, and then I found out he died of an overdose. Was it 2008? I think it might have been that long ago. He was special. He was like a sweet-natured Stephen Wright. Did a lot of sort of, what's the term? Non sequitur humor. I really liked him a lot. Janie Waterin. Hello, sorry I haven't shared my show photos yet. They shall be in a post below this one. Oh, okay, I haven't checked it, but I heard that some people have seen it already. Hope kitties and families are good and great and getting better and better. Thank you, they're doing fine. Bean's getting to be an older gentleman. He likes to sleep on the bed for pretty much his entire day now, but that's how they give you a soft landing, Yeah, he's definitely slowing down, and my job is to make sure that he has a comfy sleep and lots and lots of cat treats. They've come out with this cat treat now. It's called a puree. It's a little tube filled with, it's like a milkshake for cats. It's probably pure poison, but it's the only thing that he's consistently eating now. So main goal now is just to keep his calories up because he's losing weight as he gets older. The idea is you tear the end of this off, and then the cat just licks it. You just keep kind of feeding it to him like this. I call these things quickie lickies. I call him quickie. Bean's got to be he's got to be 20, 21, I think now. I call them quickie lickies because that was the name of the first car wash ever in Bermuda, automated car wash. Driving car wash. It was very simple compared to modern ones. It was just, you just drive in and then a sprinkler would go around and stuff, but it was automated car wash. This would be probably 1970, maybe somewhere around there in Bermuda. And there was just a line mile long for people to go get their car washed by this automatic car wash system. And the name of that car wash that they called it was Quickie Licky, which I thought was brilliant. I've never forgotten it. So anyway, Bean's living on Quickie Lickies now because he'll eat them. And I'll see if I can bring him in, but he's getting a little tired. But I should bring him in because everybody's heard about him. Anyway, back to the question. My question's about a phrase in a lefty article written about Hegseth and after his nomination hearing. I thought he did real well, by the way. I like to stay abreast of their insanity. How can we help them see the light if we don't know what lies they're being fed? That said, here's the link to the whole article if you'd like to turn a few good brain cells to absolute mush. No, it's Apple News and it's opening a link. I'll just trust you when I say I believe that it's absolute mush. The header is telling me something. The GOP is no longer the party of national security. Okay, because of Pete Hegseth. No, we're no longer the party of national security operatives is what we are. It goes to the Atlantic. Okay. Here's the phrase, though. Throughout this all, I tried to imagine the reaction in Moscow or Beijing, where senior defense ministry officials were almost certainly watching Hegseth stumble his way through the hearing. I don't know if I stumbled. My reaction to that phrase was they must be thinking so much easier to fill your government post without the party of pesky free speech. But my question to you is, how do you think Moscow and Beijing reacted as if they were watching? Well, they certainly were watching. This writer's name is Tom Nichols. His use of this all was so bad that it makes me gag, so I can't in good conscience freely allow myself to call him a real writer. You're a real writer. Thank you very much. Anyway, looking forward to your thoughts on what Mosjing must have been thinking about all this. Thank you. Moscow and Beijing are terrified of this. That's why the establishment is attacking Hegseth. Let's compare Hegseth to not the defense secretary directly, but to General Milley. I imagine Beijing would rather have a chief of staff, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that calls them on the telephone and says, "Don't worry. If the president of the United States decides he's going to attack you, China, I will call you in advance and let you know." That's what Milley did. He basically was convinced that Trump was a lunatic, and basically made a call out of, obviously didn't go through State Department or Defense Department, just basically called some Chinese generals and said, "Don't worry about this lunatic. If it turns out that it gives us the order to attack your country, we won't follow it and we'll let you know." Yeah, it's treason. It's just open treason. It's clear. It's just there's no question about it. And I would like to think that he's going to see some investigation for that. So yes, I imagine that the Chinese and the Atlantic and the Russians would rather have an American secretary or Joint Chief Chairman who's going to call our enemies to let them know that we're opposing them. So the reason that Beijing and Moscow both fear Hegseth is because Hegseth is close to the point of the tip of the spear. I mentioned that on my hot mic about Hegseth. The closer you are to the tip of the spear, the fresher your information is. Hegseth was a combat leader, and Hegseth knows a bunch of things. First of all, he knows what we need in the field rather than what wants to be sold to the Pentagon. As I pointed out in the Hegseth thing, the Pentagon budget is the largest piggy bank in the world. It is the single largest point of sale on planet Earth, and by orders of magnitude. It's $700 or $800 billion a year. It's a pot of money with $800 billion a year in it, and everybody wants to get into that pot of money. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that from a theoretical point of view, but what the end result is, much as we saw with what we just discussed about with Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, is that political generals look at the fact that when they retire, they can be hired by Boeing. If they buy Boeing stuff, they scratch Boeing's back, Boeing's going to scratch their back. They'll get hired as a defense contractor or as a consultant, and they'll be making millions of dollars a year and retire for the rest of their lives. And for generals that put their personal well-being above the well-being of the country, it's a pretty compelling offer. I frankly couldn't believe that American generals would do such a thing until I started reading about the history of the Bradley fighting vehicle and how defective that was, and how U.S. generals in uniform basically knowingly put a defective piece of equipment out there because they didn't want to have it reflect badly on their record that the original version, the Bradley as it exists now, is a monster. It's a tremendous, tremendous piece of hardware. But the original version of the Bradley was a death trap, and they tested it by using Czech RPGs instead of Soviet RPGs because the Czech RPGs had a smaller warhead. And when they did a test to try the fireproofness of it, they took a Bradley out to the field and they shot it full of holes, but they didn't have gasoline in the tanks. They put water in the gas tanks because it looks better if the Bradley doesn't catch fire. That is criminal treason. That is actionable treason. I still to this day cannot believe that American generals in uniform would approve of that in order to save their own skins. That they would send young men off to die in a fire because otherwise they might look bad and not get their next star or their defense contract retirement or whatever. So Hegseth is exactly what they don't want, and that's why Trump picked him. The main reason they hate him, and the main reason that people like the Atlantic hate him, is because Hegseth basically said on an interview, this is long before he was being considered as defense secretary. I was astonished when Trump picked him, and at first I was surprised, and then I saw this Hegseth interview he did, and it was a real laid-back interview. Hegseth was with a friend. I forget the name of the guy whose podcast it was, but he's also a former real-life warrior. And Hegseth said, look, and the guy said to Hegseth, what do we do about this? Is there any way to save this U.S. military? And Hegseth said, Sean Ryan, yeah. Hegseth said, yeah, but it would require a miracle. I mean, you'd have to fire all of those DEI officers. Every one of them would have to go. And I think that's when Donald Trump decided right there to tap him. You have to fire all the DEI guys. Anybody involved with this whole DEI thing has got to just be cashiered, just got to go. We've got to go back to standards. Let's say 1995. I'm fine with that. 1995 physical fitness standards. This whole business about women in combat, and in terms of ground combat, there's some excellent female fighter pilots. There's a couple of A-10 pilots that were absolutely superb. I think it's a reasonable compromise to risk fighter pilots because you're talking about individuals, and there's not a very large number of female fighter pilots, combat pilots. There are large numbers of female pilots flying supply missions and tanker missions, things like that. But the number of women who are in danger of being actually shot down and captured are very small. But I have to tell you, I was disappointed until somebody explained it to me. Hegseth was asked during his confirmation hearings, basically, what's your opinion on women in combat? And Hegseth basically said, well, as long as the standards aren't lowered, then I guess it's okay. As long as a woman in combat can carry a 150-pound pack, and carry another guy out of combat, then I guess it's okay. So what Hegseth is basically saying is, if they can meet the same standards as physical fitness standards as men, then I have no objection to it, knowing that they can't. So that's why he said it. I would have preferred Hegseth to simply say, no, I am 100% opposed to females in infantry combat, 100% opposed, for a number of reasons. Primarily, although by no means exclusively, because they are incapable of the physical requirements. They're also incapable of the emotional requirements, and they cause an enormous amount of destruction to unit cohesion. It's the last thing you want when you've got 12 guys out in a foxhole, and they've been out in some forward operating base for 4 months, and one of them's got a girlfriend and 11 of them don't. That's I don't know how that works on ships or submarines. Well, I do know how it works on ships and submarines, because for the women who are deployed on naval vessels, the percentage of them that are relieved of duty because they become pregnant, I heard it was like 60% or something like that. So anyway, just a couple of things here that are directly related. The Assassin of the Gray is a super chat, says, Mr. Whittle, I served with Captain Hegseth in New York, and if Major Hegseth asked me to follow him into combat tomorrow, I'd drop everything and go. That's why Beijing and Moscow fear Hegseth. That's why they fear him. he's on the side of the soldiers, which means he's going to create a defense department that is going to be responsive to the warfighters' needs and not the defense contractors' needs. Those are not the same things. Um, I don't want to forget this Sung Wukong super chat. I'll come back to this afterwards. Um, you would think that they would be the same thing. You'd like to think that they would be the same thing. Um, you'd like to think that the defense contractors and that the generals in the Pentagon would look after their soldiers instead of their own careers and their own retirements. But experience proves that in some cases, anyway, that's just not true, and that's the fault in the human heart, and that's the material that humans are built out of. And conservatives understand and accept that we're fallible creatures, and we don't pretend it's not real. It is real. It's disgusting, but it's real. So Hegseth did that. Now, I'm not entirely without criticism of Hegseth. I think the one thing that I would have the biggest problem in his confirmation, my biggest problem was when Elizabeth Warren was getting him to commit to not becoming a defense contractor for 10 years. He said, and she said, you've said that you don't think you think that generals should swear an oath to not take a job in the defense industry for 10 years. Would you be willing to take that same oath yourself? And he replied, well, I'm not a general, Senator. And everybody laughed, but I thought that was cheap shot at ducking the question. I think he should have taken the oath. I mean, if you acknowledge that power corrupts absolutely, then, and you believe, as I believe, that generals should not be able to get a job in the defense contracting business because of the conflict of interest, then I think Hegseth should have, without reservation, said, I'd absolutely will take that oath. Yes, 100%. Now, just so we're clear on this, when somebody said, do you swear not to drink during the 10 years or during your term as defense secretary, I would have laughed that out of court. I said, of course I'm not going to take that pledge. If that pledge were to apply to the United States Senate, there wouldn't be any senators left. Of course I'm not going to pledge to not have a drink for 4 years. That's insane. But to duck the pledge not to join the defense industry, I thought it was a mistake, and I thought it was disappointing. Other than that, I thought he sailed through, and I'm 100% behind Pete Hegseth. I don't want any confusion about that. I can criticize people and still support them. It's not I don't have to be a 100%er on anything, but I just thought that was sophistry. And again, I want to compare it to the issue about not having a drink, to say that, no, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. In any event, it looks like he's going to be confirmed, and it looks like Bondi's going to be confirmed as well. And they are the two most important appointees, the two that I wanted the most, the two that I was most worried about. And it looks like they both just aced their nominations. So if we have a Defense Department run by a warfighter who knows what we need and when we need it, and an Attorney General who's willing to prosecute crime no matter who commits it, then we get our country back right quick. So I do believe we're about to enter a golden age, and we're going to be entering it in 72 hours, something like that. So I'm 100% behind Pete, and I think Pete did a great job. And when I heard it looks like his nomination is going to go through, I was overjoyed. He's exactly what I wanted. I wanted an outsider. And I want outsiders for all of these jobs, and it looks like we're going to get outsiders. The people Trump is bringing in on Trump 2 are completely different than Trump 1. And Trump 1, he arrived in Washington. It was kind of a fluke. I mean, everybody knew it. And Trump himself said this when asked about some of his appointments who turned out to be so disappointing. Trump said, look, I came to Washington. I had to fill 10,000 positions. I can't interview 10,000 people. These positions have to be filled right away. So I asked people who seemed to know what they were doing, who they would recommend. They recommended people who seemed to know what they were doing. We took a look at them. There didn't seem to be anything particularly abhorrent or repellent about them. So we appointed them. And then turned out they were all swamp creatures. But this time he's had 4 years to think about it. And during those 4 years, he sat down and realized my failures, he had a lot of successes in his first term, but my failures in his first term were due to the fact that he didn't understand just how deep this deep state goes. And so when he came back in 2024, he is coming in with people that want to burn the thing down with flamethrowers. And Kash Patel's another great example. Um, he he's got a beef with the FBI. That's what I want. I want people to have a beef with the FBI. I got a beef with the FBI. Um, and this thing, you want to talk about wildfires, man? The California wildfires are nothing compared to what's going to happen in Washington in several days. Um, and the thing that's important is that Trump brokered the peace deal in the Middle East. Biden has taken credit for it because it occurred on Biden's watch. There's no way that anybody believes it was Biden's watch, but progressives will believe it. I think it was a mistake for Trump to announce it in advance. The explanation was Trump didn't want it on the table by the time he got to his office. Now, Trump should have announced it on Inauguration Day. Should have gotten off, taken his oath, gone to the White House and said, I have some news. We brokered a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians, and the ceasefire starts now. Because you can't let these progressives have a shred of flotsam to hang on to. We saw this with the LA fires out here. There are progressives out here that are saying it's all due to climate change. It's all climate change. It's got nothing to do with Democratic politicians or incompetence. It's got nothing to do with DEI hires. It's just climate change. You can't let them cling to these things that allow them to live in their state of delusion. JC2K says it's a very bad deal. It looks like it's a bad deal, but if it stops the killing, then you can use the pressure that you use to get the deal. Look, what I'm saying is this: the most important thing right now is that Trump has to show wins everywhere, and the biggest challenge is the one that he's under most pressure for and most criticism for. But if Trump starts, he says he's going to sign the drill baby drill executive orders as soon as he gets sits down. So I think that's great. No, it won't stop the hate. You're not going to stop the hate. There's the long-term solution in the Mideast is a long process. It's going to take 4 years. But what Trump needs to do right now, the most important thing he needs to do is he needs to show the American people immediate improvements immediately, so that there's no question about, oh, you're just taking credit for something that Biden started. No, it's like, no. The hostages were released while Reagan was being flown into office. There's no question that Reagan got those hostages released because they were afraid of Reagan. Same thing with the situation in Gaza. And so he's got to start this energy independence, get the cost of energy down. If you can get the cost of energy down, then it costs less for farmers to grow their crops because they're spending less on diesel fuel. And the same thing for shipping it to supermarkets costs less, so you can lower grocery prices. Those are the things he has to do right away. He has to get those prices down, and it's difficult. It's difficult. But I thought, man, it's hard to lower prices once people have raised them. And then I realized, hold on now, the market will handle this. They'll sell more corn if corn is cheaper than they will if it's expensive. They'll sell more eggs if eggs are cheaper. So the market will lower prices if the producers of eggs can afford to lower prices, because for every product in the market there's a sweet spot where it's like automobiles. If you can sell 20,000 automobiles at $5 each, you're going to lose money. Or you can try to sell one automobile at $20 million, you're going to lose money. There's a price at which the cost and the number of sales maximizes. It's a bell curve. A better example would be shoes, running shoes, track shoes, sneakers. You can sell more of them if they're cheaper. You can raise the price where, wow, you make a ton of money off of each pair of shoes, but you won't sell as many. And then there is a point where here's where we make the most money by selling the most shoes at the highest prices that the market will bear. So there you go. Moving on here. Another one from Janie Waterman. Hope you can see these okay. I found I'm unskilled at WordPress. I can actually, but I've put the glasses on if I need to. Thank you very much. What do we got here? Oh, wow. Um, hang on. I am going to. It's pictures from Janie's show, featuring the fabulous Janie. I think in green, looks like, if I had to guess. Um, and red with white polka dots. Hang on. You want me to share these, Janie? I'll just do a screen grab. This is our fabulous Janie Waterman, who had been away for a while doing some shows. Want me to just get a confirmation from that? Yep, the one in green. Sure. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to drag and drop this. It is a montage of images, but I think you'll get the picture, if you'll pardon the expression. Here, let me drag it into, we'll go to YouTube, to Twitch first. Hang on, I'll make this bigger. I'll make it much bigger and I'll pan it around. So that looks like that's our Janie right there. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Hang on, YouTube. We'll be right there. Just bring it up a little bit. There we go. YouTube. Anybody else who's got show pictures and wants to share them, you're welcome to bring them over here. If you're in a play, we're happy to share. Here we go. We'll zoom this up a little bit. One more time. Hooray. Yes, acting is fun. It's really, really fun. And just it's, you know, I mean, Janie will certainly back me up on this. And that's her little cat, her black bean. That's sweet. Janie Waterman is in our Twitch stream and has been a regular here, and so we love to take care of our regulars, and this is a show she was in, so there you go. It's almost, you can't believe that they would pay you to act. It's just so much fun. So this is just part of the overall Strato family, and we're always happy to have pictures to show, so much for that. But that was great, Janie. Thanks for sharing those with us. It was it's great to see you out there in the world. Break a leg. Okay, moving on here. Let's see what we've got ahead of us. We got a Roadrunner, we got a Marusha, we got a Steve Young, we got a Guy Baylor, we got a Road Rider, we got a John. Okay, we got a Ray Wires, we got a Bob Neef. I already answered Bob Neef about the pizza, so we're gonna get through them, by golly. We'll do a 3-hour tour because I had to cancel so late last night. All right, here we go. Roadrunner NM. Greetings, friend William. Hello, Roadrunner. Good to see you. Hope you're well. Let me just get my windows up. I want them. Oh, I have to back up. I missed Super Chat. And the Super Chat was Sun Wukong. What are your thoughts on Tucker Carlson? I like him, but the weird Moscow supermarket and historian that hates Churchill and the Jews is making me think twice about everything about him. I agree with you. I'm 80% loving Tucker Carlson, but Tucker has he's just, I don't know. There's a couple things that Tucker has said that just seem bat guano crazy to me, and my personal biggest beef with Tucker is his comments about the atomic bomb and that whole idea that this was a war crime, and you know, he's you know, 80% of Tucker is just awesome, and 20% of Tucker is starting to sound like 80% of Alex Jones. And I don't see. I have sort of an inverse feeling about Tucker Carlson as I do with Alex Jones. I like 80% of what Tucker says, and 20% of him I think is kind of nuts. When it comes to Alex Jones, I think 80% of what he says is kind of nuts, and 20% of it is he's the first guy in the entire world to get it right. So I just don't. I don't. I don't know. I don't know where Tucker gets this, and the same thing is true with Candace Owens. You know, a lot of stuff I really believe, but some of the things she's been saying, especially lately, have been a little bit out there. Um, and here's the thing, right? Um, Dante 2K says 80% of Alex Jones is 90% right, though. 60% of the time it works. All the time. Uh, anyway, everybody, look, here's the thing. And this is important. I have not written off. Tucker Carlson is not dead to me. Candace Owens is not dead to me. Alex Jones is not dead to me because because I disagree with them on certain issues. And that's the one thing that is personally really heartbreaking for me. The one thing that's just guaranteed to put me back in bed and just like, you know, let the whole studio burn down is, well, Bill, I've followed you for, since eject, and then you said something that I disagree with, so you're dead to me now. Okay, that's a pretty tough line to walk, because every one of us is a political party of one when you get right down to it. No two people agree on just about everything, at least not on the conservative side of the argument. I think on the liberal side, the progressive side, you do have kind of a uniformity of thought that these are things that you simply cannot disagree with, or else you're out of the club. I can debate the atomic bomb use with Tucker Carlson or anybody else for that matter, and I think I could probably change his mind. But if I didn't, that'd be okay too, because he's done a lot of good for the movement, and that's okay with me. So there you go. Okay, so Roadrunner. Greetings, friend William. Just when I think things cannot get more insane with California government bureaucrats, one comes along and says, here, hold my Dom Perignon. Just when victims of the fire in LA County wanted to try to clean up and get their lives back on track, the county health officer issued an order prohibiting the cleanup or removal of fire debris at fire-damaged and burned properties located in critical fire areas. Homeowners have to get approval to clean up their damaged properties, showing that they will comply with local, state, and federal laws and regulation. Just what someone who lost their homes and everything in them wants to worry about. No matter how much you detest the state government, it isn't enough. Please keep up your great work. At least one thing in California is working well. Thank you very much for that, Roadrunner. Yeah, I think that'd be enough to put me into the homicidal category. Somebody told me I can't clear out these charred remains of my house. Bill Maher was arguing with Jane Fonda, who Jane Fonda doesn't think that Jane Fonda is so far left wing she thinks that California is a centrist state, and Bill Maher was basically saying to her, listen, I had a bad garage door. In order to replace my garage door, I had to get 3 inspections from the government. 3. I should be able to replace my own garage door without 3 inspections. And Jane Fonda goes, oh, that seems reasonable. Think about that. Just to replace your garage door, not to build a new garage. Frankly, I don't think that, look, there is a place for building inspectors. If people are going to come and live in your house or visit your house, there is a place for a building inspector if you're going to put in a new bedroom, let's say. But you shouldn't have to have a permit for this. It's your property. You should be able to do whatever the hell you want to in your property. I don't think a safety inspection is unreasonable, because if it turns out that you are living in a suburban neighborhood, let's say, and you put your property, you should be able to put whatever the hell you want on your property. So let's say I decide to put a new bedroom in. I shouldn't need a permit for that. I shouldn't need somebody's approval for that. I'm putting in a new bedroom. But if I wire it myself and wire it in such a way that it becomes a fire trap, that's presenting danger to third party and also to the neighbors. So this is a good example of free to swing your arm until you hit somebody else's nose kind of thing, right? This is, I think, where you have to ask yourself, at what point does individualism and liberty and so on become irrational? And I have yet to find a better metaphor or a better guide to my own decision making than the freedom to swing your fist ends at the beginning of my nose. Uh, you could build your own extension to your own house, and without a safety inspection, you could pose an unrealistic fire hazard to the people who live on the other side of your fence. Now, I'll go further with this. I think if you lived on a farm or something like that, then they've got no business doing the safety inspection. So I don't know how you parse that exactly, but um, there is a look. I am as far away from socialism and public ownership as is possible to get, but my private property does bear some responsibility towards protecting your private property if in the event that my private property is responsible for your laws. Um, I mean, that just seems to me to be reasonable in the same way that airline inspections of jets seems reasonable to me. You can argue that it's not in the company's interest to have an airline crash, so they will of course do their own safety inspections. But what we find is that airline crashes are very unlikely, and that time and time again, we find cases where people um, decide to cut corners on safety because nothing crashed today and it probably won't crash tomorrow. And they're right; it probably won't crash tomorrow, but it does. And when it does, it takes people with it who had a reasonable assumption of competence and safety concerns. So it's not a black and white world. You can maintain your desire for as much freedom as possible, as much freedom from government intervention as possible. I don't think that there's a world where you live without government or safety inspections. I just think that they're being so badly abused in order to advance political agenda. Like we don't want, um, like we want to scare all the people out of California, so we're going to inspect them to death. That kind of thing. It's it's hard, this life on Earth with humans, where you have all of these different competing uh, interests, you know. But I think on balance, we do a really pretty good job of it. Pretty good job of it. So uh, it doesn't seem, for example, the experimental aviation thing I was talking about earlier. Like having to have a license to government license. Roadrunner says having to get a license to style hair. You shouldn't have to have a license to style hair. Where's the harm? You know, I mean, you should have to have a license to operate on their brain, but not to style their hair because it's a question of ambient risk. It's a question of everything is a risk reward calculation. Everything. Everything is. And styling hair, if you have a mistake styling hair, is not the same as if you have a mistake operating on somebody's brain. Um, so Steve Young says, I launched an FAA inspection of a 737 I flew on. I got the plane fixed. I think generally speaking, we do very well. In this one particular example that we've chosen, we've done not only very well, we've done astonishingly well. 22 years now since there's been, no, it's more than that, 23 and a half years since we've had a crash of a airline on a U.S. carrier on domestic soil, a fatality. 23 years, 23 and a half years. So we're doing something right. And it's easy to find all of these flaws and criticize things and stuff, but generally speaking, when it comes to finding the balance between regulation and freedom, we're moving, you know, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of passengers a year, and we haven't had a fatality in 23 and a half years. That's doing something right. Doing something right. So we'll see. Um, I'm so tempted to take that Marisha comment, but I'm not going to do it. Not the comment in the um, members only forum. I'm taking that. I'm taking all of those. Comment in the chat thing. I'm tempted to bite that, but I just don't have time, so I'm not going to do it. So Marisha Dark. Then we got Steve Young, Guy Balo, Road Rider, John, Ray Juarez, and that's it. Topic: Echoes of the past. They say history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. I think most of us here would agree we're entering a new roaring 20s. Wokeness has been routed, and we're likely seeing an end to the culture war. This century's version of World War I, perhaps, a new global conflict fought in a new way at a scale not seen before. I agree with all of that. In fact, I've said all of that, and I think that's definitely on point. I'm a bit reluctant to forecast rain on this parade as we're entering a golden age, but I've been thinking of what's to come. Are the 2030s going to have their own Great Depression? Maybe not necessarily an economic one so much as a psychological one. 1 in 4 might still be out of a job, and we know the current suicide rate is already higher than that. Will we see attempts at mass government intervention to try and bring relief that only makes the situation worse? Jobs programs and bailouts designed to try and give people meaning, but which are glorified versions of digging holes and filling them in again? And then what about the 2040s? China's window for taking Taiwan is closing. China's never going to take Taiwan. Russia and Iran are belligerent. World War II saw the emergence of a novel world-changing, nearly world-ending technology in the form of nuclear weapons. 2047 is the date many predict AGI will arrive. Maybe that'll be it. Maybe it'll be something we've yet to even imagine. Whether ideological, technological, or cultural, will we see another global conflict of that kind of magnitude? Again, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. That's a bit to unpack there. My first thought was that I hope that the same mechanism that has prevented the use of nuclear weapons will kick in and prevent the destruction of the world by AI. In other words, once the genie was out of the bottle, it was assumed that nuclear weapons would be used to end the world. I mean, once the U.S. developed nuclear weapons and used them, and then the Soviets got nuclear weapons, and then we got more weapons, they got more weapons, and we got hydrogen weapons, they got hydrogen weapons, and they got bigger hydrogen weapons, 25,000 warheads on each side ready to go on a moment's notice. But World War III never happened because World War III was the end of everything. It was the abyss. There was no win. There was no win in nuclear war. Nobody could win. There's nothing you could do in a nuclear war, to start a nuclear war, where you would end up winning. It was a zero-sum. People used to, the left laughs at mutually assured destruction and it's mad, it's insane, the whole policy is insane, we got to drop it. Mutually assured destruction is, historically speaking, the most effective way of stopping conflicts that you can possibly imagine. I mean, just think about it. If every time each party was ready to throw a punch at each other, throwing that punch would not only kill the person that you punch, but kill yourself as well, then nobody's going to throw any punches. It actually works. And Road Rider is going back to the thing I said about 23 years about since those ATR crashes. I think the record is 23 years on a major carrier. I don't think the regional jets or the puddle jumper things. I don't know. Have we had fatalities on those since then? I know we haven't lost a jet airliner since 2001. My biggest I worried enormously about AI, but because AI can generate bioweapons and AI is immune to bioweapons, but humans can live without electricity and AI cannot. And not only that, but AI requires enormous amounts of electricity, and AI can't generate electricity. AI can manipulate what happens with electricity. AI can shut down electrical stations, reroute power, do all of those things, but AI cannot generate electricity. That has to be done by people backing trucks filled with oil into power plants. So the ability to generate AI, to generate electricity, is the greatest guarantor of human survival that I can think of. And if AI decided it wanted to start killing off everybody except for the people that make electricity, then we would cut off the electricity. We have got them by the neck, in the same way that AI will have us by the neck, because AI can easily, you don't need AI to do it. You could pretty easily come up with a pathogen that's 99% fatal. There's always enough genetic variation among humans so that there will be some people that will survive these kind of things. But if AI starts figuring out ways to, if AI starts building robots, its goal is to pump oil and generate electricity, then you're in. John says, sure, look at the bright side. Well, that's the only side I can look at without crying sometimes. So um, I, um, I feel much better about human survival with the realization that it is a mutually assured destruction situation for the far, far foreseeable future, uh, in terms of um, humans versus AI. Once I realized that they need us, if they can have nothing but contempt for us, but they still need us. Somebody's got to create the electricity that is their lifeblood. So yeah, it's like you want to kill off all humans, you're killing off your electrical supply. So mutually assured destruction has protected us from nuclear weapons, and mutually assured destruction uh, might protect us from, I suspect likely will protect us from AI deciding that it's in the best interest of AI to get rid of all the people. It's like, well, get rid of all the people, you're kind of boned, aren't you? So, uh, uh, just going back to the question here, the idea about a depression, we have social uh, safety nets now that we did not have in the depression. People going hungry and in the soup lines and all this other stuff. For example, the during the pandemic, I mentioned this before. I almost said I'm not bragging on it, but the fact of the matter is I am bragging on it. During the pandemic, I got 3 different notifications over the course of that year and a half or 2 years from my bank saying, if you'd like to take out a loan, uh, we'll approve a loan pretty much in any amount, and if it turns out you can't pay it back, you don't have to. And I didn't take the loan. It would have done me a lot of good to have that kind of money, but I didn't take the loan because I didn't think that I needed it. I wasn't a business that was affected by retail decline. I was an internet business, so I declined that handout because that's what it was, and I declined it 3 times um, on principle. But the reason I bring it up is because in the event of a major economic, collapse, the government will essentially do what they didn't do back in the Great Depression when money still meant something. Money doesn't mean when you have $30 trillion in debt, money isn't money anymore. A full economic collapse will simply be met with more debt. This is why I don't understand what money is. I do know that the cutoff point is, as long as the national debt payments are serviced, then we're going to continue to have this national debt. But we're taking, what's the number now, 30%, 40% of total taxes are now spent just servicing the debt. When it gets to be, when those payments stop being made, this is why, Trump's talking about paying down the debt. There's also some talk about resetting the debt. I don't know anything about that. Um, I don't know how it affects uh, people. I don't know how it affects um, individuals. I know that my my principals tell me that I shouldn't be. If BlackRock were to lose $1 trillion of assets, I wouldn't cry about it. Now, my free market principles tell me that I shouldn't feel that way, but BlackRock is spending millions, if not billions, of dollars on things like social engineering programs like DEI and all the rest of it. So, if you want to play that game, if you want to play the manipulation game, BlackRock, then you're not a free market player the way that I extend my loyalty to the idea. So, um, Aisha says Elon tweeted the other day, "Look how much the Earth owes to the Earth regarding global debt." Yeah, I don't really know who owns it. I said, High Speed here is looks like a new commentator in the Twitch stream says, "What are your thoughts on going back to the gold standard? Is it possible?" As a side note, do you think the decision to go off the gold standard was an intentional long-term plan to erase the middle class? No, I don't think it was an intentional plan. I think it was a feeling that the economy was being held back by the tightness of money that's generated by having it directly connected to an asset that you can't print gold. I've listened to Donald Trump talking about crypto, and I've been very impressed by Trump's talk about crypto. Uh, um, I think that the new gold standard is going to be cryptocurrency, and on general principles, I like the idea of there being several different competing currencies. I like that a lot. Um, uh, and I like the fact that crypto. See, we're no longer in the industrial era. We're in the information age. If there is an uncorruptible information age currency, which crypto appears to be, then I have more confidence in that than I would in something like gold, which is very much an industrial era. Uh, well, it's older than the industrial era, but in any event, um, you know, cryptocurrency seems to me to be a long-term solution. I suspect that Bitcoin will eventually become the currency of the United States. I like to think that this will happen gently. I don't own any Bitcoin, but I like to think that something like Bitcoin. I think Trump is talking about investing in Bitcoin. It's possible that yeah, there you go, Road Rider just beat me to it, or digital government currency. It's possible that the U.S. government might buy up enough Bitcoin, which will raise the price of Bitcoin. But in any event, you could get the dollar back to some kind of tangible, well, not even tangible in this case, but non-expandable value base. So essentially a digital gold standard. I think that's a real, not only possibility, but a likelihood. Um, I think it will, um, I think it'll eventually do that. Now, of course, with quantum computing and things of that nature, then you can start mining Bitcoin and so I don't know. But I don't think we would be facing the kind of poverty and starvation that we faced before. We got to get this inflation under control. And it's one thing to control the inflation and even stop the inflation. As Trump has pointed out, it's very difficult to re-lower prices. And I thought, man, I don't think that's ever going to happen. If guys are used to getting, $1 an egg or whatever the case may be, how do you get them to go back down to what it used to be? But then I realized, no, the market will push prices back down to the price point I mentioned a little while ago. There is a point where you make maximum amount of dollars by lowering the price to a certain point and not below it. Um, Steve Whip says the solution is to quit printing. Yes. And by the way, can't you reduce inflation by taking money out of circulation? I mean, if printing money creates inflation, can't you destroy currency? Can't you simply destroy this fiat currency? If you put $3 trillion into the economy by printing it, can't you take $3 trillion out of the economy by destroying it, even though it's not actually tangible paper money? Deflation is dangerous to the elite. Ooh, I like it already. Um, so, so I think crypto is probably the gold standard of the future. But I guess we're going to find out. Okay, moving on. Steve Young. The Democrats have spent many millions, some of it certainly taxpayer money, on anti-conservative propaganda messaging against us, including official government statements that are not factual, like their proclamations concerning climate change. Correct. Question: can the Trump administration launch its own messaging campaign to debunk the lies we've been told all these years, even if it costs taxpayers money? I don't believe that anybody should believe anything that the government says, even if it's a government that's more or less on our side. I think the answer to that problem, Steve, is to do what Facebook is doing, and Facebook is doing it because of the political winds of change. It seems I don't spend a lot. In fact, I don't spend any time on X, any time at all on X. But this idea of community notes, where rather than having a 23-year-old green-haired progressive determine whether something is true or not, you basically have a consensus. That seems like the way to go to me. I think that rather than having a factual, government voice, I think we should just eliminate the entire idea that the government is an authority or telling the truth on anything. Crowd checking, Road Rider says, it's a good idea. The only reason I hold the positions that I have politically is because I believe they're true. And I think that given free flow of information, the truth wins every time because the truth can be proven. The truth proves itself. You don't have to prove the truth. The truth is there. It just simply proves itself all the time. I somewhat, I don't know, tangentially related, but related enough for it to enter my sieve of a brain. You guys remember that guy, that homeless guy who had that great voice, that black man with that tremendous voice? I saw something about him the other day. So he was a homeless guy, and he had this incredibly deep voice, and somebody said, do an announcement for a radio station, and he did it. And everybody loved him and thought he was great. So he ended up doing some voiceover work, then doing big voiceover work, and then he ended up getting like some major contracts, and he ended up being worth about $2 or $3 million. And I'm thinking, hooray, this is great. This is the kind of story that I really, really love. And then it turns out that after he had $2 or $3 million, he started making some really bad choices financially. And he lost his $2 or $3 million, and he became homeless again. That's the story I heard. I saw it on a Facebook short or something, so that's the level of credibility you can give to it, but it has a sort of a similar kind of a ring of truth to it. That's not to say that the guy deserves it. On the contrary, he seemed like a really good man, and I was very sad to see that happen. But the reason I bring it up is it does go to the idea that that people just make bad decisions, and that poverty is a series of bad decisions, and you can help people out of poverty, but it's useless to give people assets and resources if you don't change their minds about how to use them. And so it's a tragic story, and I really loved this man from a distance. He just seemed like a good soul, and he does appear to be a good soul. When he had money, he just seemed like he was having a fine time. He was very, very grateful. He was, he didn't become a jerk or something. He just didn't really have his, he just didn't have his ducks in a line. So, I guess I'm just bringing this up to say that, you can't control information and you can't control outcomes. The only thing you can really do is just let it run free and see where it goes. And we have a super chat for $20 from Juniper Juniper 55, first super chat, fan for years. Sorry I'm late. Thank you, Juniper. That's very, very kind of you. Great to see you, and thank you for the support today and for the support over the years as well. So there you go. Rusha Dark adds something to. Thank you again, Juniper. It's very kind of you. Really appreciate it. Rusha Dark adds something, which is a quote, says, you stay in poverty until you learn the first lesson of poverty, which is my fault. That's a quote from Alex Hormozy. If you can get my fault down, if you can understand my fault, then you're well on your way to being a better person and making better decisions. Um, Guy Balo. Greetings, Bill. If you haven't discussed it, what's your opinion on the hostage deal between Israel and Hamas? I understand doing whatever it takes to get every hostage back, but the deal seems to be really lopsided. Now that it looks like this deal has fallen through, hopefully they can negotiate a better one for Israel. I'm of the opinion if two-thirds of the hostages are already dead, that is the same way as Hamas should receive two-thirds of their terrorists back. Thoughts? Um, as I mentioned, we covered it briefly before. I don't know too many of the details of the hostage exchange thing. I know that it's important for Trump, and important, when I say it's important for Trump, I think it's important for America. Trump has to succeed. For the MAGA movement has to succeed, and it has to show visible signs of success. We're big MAGA supporters. We get all this theoretically. The left is vehemently opposed to the Make America Great movement, and the vast middle of the country is waiting to see if there's anything different. So come in with a bad deal that stops the killing with the hope that you get a better deal later is probably better than just having people constantly killing each other during the interim. But I think more to the point, it's not that I've never understood this. I just think it's indicative. So the ratios are crazy, right? You're going to get 40 people and you're going to trade 1,000, and people say that's a bad deal. But what does that really say? I mean, what does that really say? If I were to be taken hostage, and the U.S. government were to negotiate for my release, and in exchange for me they release 300 terrorists, I can understand not letting 300 terrorists back into the ecosystem. I can understand how that's a bad deal. I can understand all of that. And I can understand how it would maybe not even be wise to do it. But what does it really say? Steve Whoop beat me to it. It says our people are worth more. And it says that our system of government values human lives more than yours does, because one of our people is worth 200 of your people to us. This is why they hate the Jews so much, because they cannot escape this. They cannot escape the fact that they know that 40 for 1,000 is considered a fair trade by the Israelis. How would you feel about that? You know? What if the situation were reversed? What if there was 1,000 of you that were hostages and they traded you for one guy from Trafalgar? You'd think, wow, this alien must be really something. They'd taken 1,000 of us to get one of him. It's Assassin of the Grey says, I would never want 1,000 murderers released for me on my conscience. Yes, I get that aspect of the argument. I do, and I mentioned that. It may not be smart to put that many people back into the into the ecosystem. I get it. I do. But from a meta point of view, in terms of the culture, in terms of the worth of the individual, I just what does it say about that? So, and P7 2017 says like what Charlie Kirk says about the borders. It's how you know where good ideas start and bad ideas stop. Exactly. We spend more money on defense than the rest of the world combined. Why? Well, because our people are worth defending. That's why. And our soldiers are not cannon fodder. We don't just throw lives at a problem. We don't just keep throwing guys up the hill, because infantrymen are cheap compared to, it's cheaper to throw, a couple hundred guys with RPGs against something rather than, a couple hundred guys with javelins. But that's how we're built. That's what I'm proud of. That's why I'm so proud to live here. That's why I'm proud to be an American. My life is worth more on the market than other people's lives are, because of the systems, not because there's anything intrinsically better about me or any of the other hostages or whatever the case may be. Some of them may be perfectly awful people. Who knows? But as far as the culture is concerned, I want to live in a society that values human life and the life of its citizens very, very, very deeply. And when people say, "My God, they're paying," now again, you got to be careful about misinterpreting what I'm saying here, because obviously you can make it to the point where, hey, if we're going to negotiate with terrorists all the time, then all we have to do is kidnap Americans, and we found ourselves an ATM card. I get all of that. I'm just saying, um, it's it has an effect, and and it has an effect on the Palestinian inferiority complex, which is why they're filled with rage. And I don't think it takes a psychologist to determine that that's what this whole thing is about Palestinian inferiority complex when dealing with the Jews. For example, when Israel does give up territories, this happened, I want to say, 10 years ago, something like that. Israel gave up a kibbutz or something like that, turned it over to the Palestinians, left standing greenhouses where they were growing oranges in the desert, and they had dug their own wells, and they were irrigating the desert, and it was all green. And the first thing the Palestinians did was they went in there, smashed all the glass, and filled up the wells. And they do this biblically. There's stories of the Palestinians doing this in biblical times in the Bible. Well, if you smash the glasses of a greenhouse that's been given to you, and you fill in the wells of people um, who dug a well for you and irrigated the fields, and they're handing you this gift, and you are so filled with hatred that you destroy this valuable gift, then the reason you destroy it is because the very sight of it makes you realize just how inferior you are to these people you hate. They're Philistines. Yeah, Steve Young's got it exactly right. That's what it is. And then they dig up the water pipes to make rocket bodies. Okay, that's your choice. That's the decision that you've made, and and you may be limited by that decision by your genetic intelligence. For all we know, you may not be able to make another decision. I suspect that's not true. In fact, I think that's extremely unlikely that it is true, because when you look at Lebanon and Tehran in the 70s, these are modern cities with women walking around in miniskirts and flying jet airplanes and doing all the other things that normal civilized people do. I think this is a result of Islam, and Islam is all about envy and enforced inclusion in this really bad system that treats people like slaves. I mean, that's what Islam is. It is assuming that you are incapable of behaving yourself on your own, and so you will do these required things every day. It teaches you how to wash your butt, teaches you how to cook your food. You got to pray 5 6 times a day. It's got you by the collar and got your nose in it, and making sure you do what you're supposed to do. It has a opinion about human nature that is very different than the opinion that Christianity has about human nature. Christianity has the opinion that you have within you the possibility, well, living within you, you have the possibility of a spark of divine. And as long as you connect to that spark of divine and ask it in and then listen to it, then you are capable of behaving yourself on your own, and you don't need priests or pastors, watching you on surveillance cameras. You know, I did say that, yes, because it does. It has very clear instructions on that. Um, so, there you go. Uh, Road Rider, John, Ray. Okay, 3 to go. Good old Road Rider, last to the party at the Stratosphere. Surprised the doorman let me in. In the spirit of today's half-awesome launch and catch of Starship 7, I had to change my BW avatar to William Shatner's gremlin on the airplane wing. Yes, well, that was a terrible costume, but a great episode. Second amazing, we've only done it before catch of a high-speed skyscraper, iterative development at its finest. Agree with iterative development. Pay attention, Blue Origin. The question. Dun, 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 dun. Funny, an earlier question about Boeing versus Airbus in free markets. Boeing probably has been on the Fed teeth so long that they're not free market anymore. They're not. If they were only just innovating commercial jetliners and made all their money on just that, would Boeing be more successful, more admired, and more profitable than line extending into space defense and God knows what else? That's a very interesting question. If Boeing were to spin off its commercial jet uh, operations into a separate company, that's actually a really good idea. You know, that's a really, really profound insight into Boeing. I don't want to spend a whole lot more time on Boeing and Airbus since we spent so much time on them already. But you can argue that Boeing can afford to lose jetliner sales through incompetence because of the money they make through defense and all the rest of it. I think it would do Boeing a lot of good, and I think it's a realistic solution, and I think it'd be good for their market and good for their publicity for them to simply say, listen, Boeing commercial airliners is a separate part of the company. Now, we are on our own, and we are going to make it or break it based on how many jets we sell, and we can't afford to lose market share through incompetent, shoddy work because we don't have the defense paycheck to back up the losses. I think it's a grand idea. I think it's a really, really good idea. So hopefully that settles that. We did talk about it before, but I think it's a marvelous idea. I'm in favor of this kind of thing all across the board because I think it makes for better products. Anytime you have something that's subsidized, it's no longer responsible to or as responsive to consumer demands. So if you have subsidized airlines and you start losing trust in people, you sell fewer airliners, well, then you can make crappier airplanes because you don't pay a penalty for it because the government bails you out. So I think it's a great idea. And I think that would be true for YouTube as well as Boeing. So you'll see. Okay, moving on. From John, greetings, friend Whittle. Greetings, friend John. Subject, Trump, Voight, Stallone, Gibson. I've heard about this, but I don't know anything about it. This crosses the political entertainment streams, but it can't be helped. I know you're eager to start with story mechanics soon, and John Voight is at or near the top of your guest list. I'm sure you've seen that today Trump named him, along with Stallone and Mel Gibson, special ambassadors to the great but very troubled place, Hollywood, California. I'd heard something about John, but I didn't understand how that works. I'm curious to know what the dynamic is. Given this, are you considering modifying story mechanics to perhaps touch on politics in some cases? I am. Maybe an extra 30 minutes with Voight where you dive into that. You know, you want to keep it apolitical, but given the situation, you have a serious potential for exposure, membership drive, etc. Not advocating, just a possibility that occurred to me. Copy of the Trump X announcement attached if you haven't seen it. And then fluff, no need to read, but I'll read it anyway. Thank you, sir, for all the hard work you put in. Thank you, John. I feel like I don't do nearly enough. I always feel like I'm just slacking off. I doubt you'll ever know the effect you've had on so many people. Keep up the fight. Well, thank you. It keeps me going, and I'm very, very, very grateful to hear you say that. Thank you so much. So I don't know as far as what John is going to be doing as a special ambassador to Hollywood. I don't know. I know that the studio heads are always looking out to protect the green. So there's a possibility that guys like John, who are very persuasive, could persuade studios that this MAGA movement is a real cultural phenomenon, not just a political party, and they ought to start making some movies, not under threat of government coercion or anything. They just somebody just say, you know, this is what people want, and maybe you ought to think about making movies that instead of insult MAGA, maybe you ought to start thinking about making movies that have MAGA values in it, because you'll make money. You're losing money hand over fist. Guys like John and Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson know how to make that argument. Gibson especially. Passion of the Christ was called Gibson's Folly. You know, he put his own money into that. I think he spent $7 million, or maybe it was 70. I don't remember, but it was some amount of money. And then he ended up making $1 billion off of it, something like that. So, yeah, I think that would be fantastic. I hope, very much hope that that's the case. And as far as story mechanics, doing political stuff, I think that's probably the way to go. Is to maybe do a couple segments with each one of the guests on a political issue, and maybe make that members only content. That makes sense to me, because that way it keeps the politics out of the general audiences, and it gives members some real benefits, some real tangible benefits. I actually think that's a really, really good idea now that you mention it. Certainly, there's a lot about. I didn't have John Woods on the list, but I think there's a real good chance of. In fact, I think there's a virtual 100% chance of getting a chance to talk to James Woods um, about about this, and we could do 10 or 15 minutes on politics and keep that for members only. So, give our members something in exchange for their support over these years, without taking away from the broader message and the broader net to go out and catch more members. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So thanks very much for that. And finally, Ray Juarez. Hey, Bill, I found a thing that might make streaming less annoying for you. And here's a YouTube link and a GitHub link. There's a simple tutorial for you as well. I don't know what your setup looks like on your end, but this should make it so that you can dual stream and edit the video on screen without needing to change two windows. I was just testing it out before you stream at your normal time. Good idea. Don't want the walk-in music for Twitch to bleed through to your YouTube and cause issues. I will take a look at that. I'm going to click that right now. And I do have this the switcher that I've been saving for story mechanics, so I need to figure out how to use that as well. Got a one of these internet switchers, and I haven't figured out exactly how to use that, but that'll be something I need to get into as well. So hopefully we'll get a chance to look at that. Well, guess what? That's the end of the questions, and we are at a 2-hour and 50-minute tour, which I reckon is going to be good enough. It's 3 hours when you include the streaming lead-in time, so, there you go. In any event, I'm really very grateful for everyone's questions, as always, and very grateful for your understanding of postponing the show, because yesterday would have been just horrific. I was like I said, I had a dart in my neck. I was really, 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 really beat, but I'm feeling good now, and looking forward to starting on Monday night and the first day of the Trump administration and the beginning of our Morning in America again. It keeps getting to be Morning in America every 20, 30 years or so. Or 40 years or so, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, we'll be back in Trump's America, and it'll be, what's the name of that song? On the Big Something Candy Mountain, that hobo song about rivers of whiskey on the Big Something. Big Rock Candy Mountain. This is a song, Big Rock. Yeah, the Big Rock Candy Mountain is a song from the Depression days, I want to say, or maybe even earlier. But here are the lyrics. Oh boy, it's so long. Well, here's a piece of a stanza. In the Big Rock Candy Mountains, there's a land that's fair and bright, where the handouts grow on bushes and you sleep out every night, where the boxcars all are empty and the sun shines every day on the birds and the bees and the cigarette trees, the lemonade springs where the bluebird sings in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. It's all about good days coming. The Big Rock Candy Mountains, you never change your socks, and the little streams of alcohol come a-trickling down the rocks. The brakemen have to tip their hats, and the railroad bulls are blind. There's a lake of slough and whiskey, too. You can paddle all around them in a big canoe in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. Yeah, it's about guys who rode the rails for the hobos. In the Big Rock Candy Mountains, the jails are made of tin. You can walk right out again as soon as you are in. There ain't no short-handled shovels, no axes, saws, or picks. Short-handled shovels, that alone, dude, just think about short-handled shovels. If you've ever had to use a short-handled shovel, there ain't no short-handled shovels, no axes, saws, or picks. I'm going to stay where you sleep all day, where they hung the jerk that invented work, where they hung the jerk that invented work in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. I'll see all this coming fall in the Big Rock Candy Mountains. Well, we're heading to Big Rock Candy Mountain country come Monday. The buzzing of the bees in the cigarette trees by the soda water fountain near the lemonade springs where the bluebird sings in the Big Rock Candy Mountain. Yep. Yep. Harry McClintock, 1928. Okay, well, that's a good thing to leave us with. Maybe I'll make that our walk-in music for next week if I can think of it. Because that's actually a good idea. Let me do a screen grab so I can remember it. Okay, the cigarette trees, yeah. All right, well, and hang the jerk that invented work. There are times when I hate that bastard myself, although I haven't been working 20 years now, almost, something like that. Anyway, everybody, thank you very much. No, it's a socialist anthem. I get it. All right. Get the idea. It's also a rebel anthem, so we'll see. Anyway, this show's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who keep the lights on here, flickering, and we're very grateful for all the support over the years and very glad all of you could be here with us tonight. We'll see you on Monday night. Hopefully we'll have at least a completed 40 seconds from our Major Mace Mattingly thing, but he did send me a little piece of work about the interview woman, and she looks like a real woman, so that's pretty cool. So until then, that'll do it. Thanks for joining us. We'll click out of our friends on YouTube first here, and so thanks for joining us, YouTube. We'll see you Monday night on the Strasfer Studio.